David's where we need to talk.
You say I think everything you know about this place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but yeah. So a couple things. First off, as we were talking about one of the lessons learned is for me coming to campus, the need for facilities to be engaged early on, even if it's just trying to understand what's there, what's going on, because to them they do a facilities conditions index. They maintain that for all buildings around campus. They're getting ready to update that. This is something that Kevin Brown, who's my boss, the chief of facilities, is brought to campus and is updated. So there's a third party that does these assessments. So to them, AJLC, yeah, we think, boy, it really needs something like this. That's not the weakest link on campus. So it's on their radar. It's not at the top. And early on, again, sorry if I'm repeating, we heard back when we kind of brought this up, no one's talking about this. In other words, the executive leadership team are not talking about this. That's starting to change now. Mm-hmm. So, but it's just trying to understand what are you hearing, and that's where John and David, have helped bring this to the fore. So the fact that Joe Komar came back at 5 o'clock on Friday, and then stayed till 6:30 on Friday, and he's got an hour drive. Not that that matters, but he's, it
was a commitment.
It's a commitment, and it's a voluntary. I mean, so you're seeing him. He didn't have to do that. Right. Now he was invited. He wasn't here the whole day. He knew about it, but so there's also. But I'm just saying, he came back and he volunteered to us at one point. He can see the need. I think he said that there's no other building that's as sexy as AJLC or something like that. Like there's like he gets like on all these different levels. Why, and I think that's why I said I think the process that we're using has probably as much value to campus. It's just how can we do that so that we're educating our team, because we do need facilities to see the value here. It's just that how this project was born, how it's managed, it's contributed to the siloing that is also endemic on campus. And you got unique systems, but as we've said, it's now not totally. I mean, we've got geothermal on the whole campus. We got all these different systems, and so I think to help our facilities team realize this is another way they can add value to themselves. It's also a way for us to. It's part of the future because we're going to continue to decarbonize campus. That's part of my office's charge. So understand for Joe, he oversees the, not just the facilities conditions index, but the capital improvement plan, the CIP. And that's where projects get prioritized and look 3 or 4 years out, even further. And everybody puts in, here's what needs to happen. And those are the major capital projects, either new stuff or major renovations. So what does it take to get onto there? And he said to us, and we kept kind of going around in circles with him. If we can distill down, and we have it, you can see that the programmatic. What's the need? The programmatic need. He thinks that the academic side of it, because that's another like angle for this. If we can articulate that, and I think that that's more back in your world, John. But as far as David Kamitska, the dean of art and sciences, I think there's some interest, etc. But where these things the confluence here will be with Rebecca Skillings. She's the VP of Finance on campus. She's basically the number 2, number 1 in my heart. Don't tell your mom.
Now I'm serious.
No, not at all. In fact, I know. This is. I know. She's basically family. This is. Her sister is my sister-in-law. It just happens to be. Yeah, I mean, but just it happens to be like that. So anyway,
I did not know that.
But Rebecca, as VP of Finance, expresses it, and I think she shows that she's a systems thinker. When she thinks about carbon neutrality on campus, land use management, et cetera, she wants to see the big picture. And so when some of our team who are much more oriented on like the new project, let's build a new shiny thing. You know, I got ideas for knocking this down and replacing this and that kind of stuff. She asked them to step back. I want to see the big picture, how this fits in. And I think that there's so much, not just story, but like reality of how AJLC is the big picture. It's like we're like a microcosm of the future on campus. I think she will be the one, if she connects those dots, she sees it. In fact, we have a meeting in 2 weeks. The follow-up.
It's this week, isn't it? Thursday?
Is it Thursday? Yeah, it may be Thursday. Yeah, it's the 6th. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's next week.
It used to be.
It is not about this building
I know.
now. That's
Well,
the thing.
This week was really good.
Yeah, right.
That meeting is not about this building. I don't want to make it be because I think that would screw up what it is
I'm
about.
just saying it's part of the big picture. That I think that we are beginning to have these conversations, and I think that she will open it. So as far as next steps, that's what I was trying to get to with Joe. Is we pull together the narrative, the program language. I guess I'm still at where I was when we were planning this. I'm like, I think this is a vision statement, programmatic language that supports it, and it is. We would like to proceed to have hire an A&E firm to develop that scope of work.
What is A&E?
Architecture and engineering.
Yeah.
To basically pull together what do we currently have, where might we go with it, so we can have that concept design and budget done. But I think that for facilities, they are as John said, they are feeling shorthanded. So they would like to help, but they need, as Joe said, he needs someone to tell him. Because we have the funding, he said earlier, this like a year ago, he said, if you've got the funding, you can kind of jump the line, but the leadership still need to agree of it jumping the line. And jumping the line, we have bookstore, we had a whole series of other, you can imagine, competing things on campus. So that's why I think we can use the process to engage more campus. We can host salons. We can use this to really raise awareness and build the momentum so that we can do it right, but also we can really maximize the value, because I think that that's what could be there. One thing that came up last night when we were talking, Lindsay, if the college can help collaborate with your institution to help make a way for other existing high performance buildings to achieve to go after living building challenge. That could be really exciting, I think, because it's a way for us to get back to the industry. It's also a way for guys to slow the process down a little bit, and yet still have meaning, in what we're doing. I think that could be really cool, and it would be a way for us to be leading in a way. So, a couple threads there.
I do want to go to the fundraising, but we actually divided this into two sections, one being sort of the first one focused on the internal. So if we look at the agenda, there's the sort of AJLC 2.0 priorities for the study, priority items, program, and then the program statement. Because I want to think about, are we thinking about one document or two documents here? How might they differ? And, based on the conversation with Joe Komar, I left it a little bit confusing, the way I described it to, because it was a very positive conversation. You could see Joe was engaged in this. I described it afterwards to Chris as it felt like two ships passing in the night with the people on either ship smiling and waving at each other.
How pleasant.
I mean, right? You gotta take your wins. That's a win.
Because what I heard him say, which was kind of internally contradictory, is we need to, and this is, see, when we initially started this process a year ago, they said, you've got a pathway, and Ben was involved in this too. Your pathway is, first thing we need is a description of the problems with the building. That's the way we do this. We can't put you into the system without that problem statement. And the kind of problem statement they were looking for had no room whatsoever for vision or education. Right. It was simply like, you tell us what's broken, what needs fixed.
Right.
And that was it. And they said, you can't even enter our system. Like, our bureaucratic system does not see you if it doesn't have that. And then there was the flip side of that, which he's talking about, which is his boss saying, no one is talking about this on campus. And then when I heard that, I instantly went into the dean's office and said to the dean, this is a big deal. We need to do this thing. And then the dean actually, bless his heart, said, yeah, I totally see that. I'm like, you got an environmental science major, you got data science major. This is synergistic with those. This needs to be a thing. And he's like, yeah. And he started talking about it. And I think that's why his boss then said, hey, actually people are talking about this now, and we talked with fundraising and got the approval. And that was quite a hurdle to get the approval to actually have them just say, you can do a very soft launch to alums, because of course they're never going to let you raise money without their permission, because the last thing they want is for someone going rogue in terms of raising money, because then they're thinking, hey, that's competing with our own agenda and priorities. So we did get, that was hard to get. That was a lot of work to get that okay. It literally took months to get them to just say, you can do like a very soft letter out to alums asking them for money. So those were the big hurdles we went through in the fall. And my understanding, I feel like there's like an addition that's been added on now, because what I was told at the time is, you raise the money and you can jump the line, just as Chris had said. But now I come to understand, you may raise the money, you don't jump the line until you get internal people saying you can, even if you have the money sitting there for the study, you don't get the okay unless there's another level of okay, even after you've raised the money. So we have plenty of money for this study now because people did kick in for this. But my feeling is what we need is that, I feel like what I put together for the 2.0, pretty good. I feel like what it needs is here's the specifics. Like, I heard a lot of really good, creative, specific ideas in the last 2 days that I feel like we could chalk into different categories and sort of flesh out vision for each of those potentially, which then when it goes to like architecture and engineering, well, first of all, it would be part of an RFP. And that seemed very clear that Joe was like, our job now is to put together an RFP. Like that seemed like we're a place where the ships were touching each other.
Right.
Like you put together a document that is the RFP.
For what
this.
exactly?
For the A&E.
For A&E.
For an A&E.
To do the analysis.
Yes. And my initial thought was, if we're short on people, then you hire someone, you hire an additional person or hire a firm, and you say, we would like you to help us draft an RFP, RFQ, a process to evaluate those firms, help us evaluate those firms and make a recommendation, but help like facilitate that. And what FPC has said, I don't have enough people, but if you're willing to be basically the representative, Norman, then we'll go along with that. Because I'm saying to them, look, you guys, there's a thing here. There's a thing here. It's exciting, and the planets are lining up. You know, we've got the 25th anniversary, all those different things. We'd be fools not to take advantage of this.
Right.
So I just want to add, because when we started this conversation, so I do a lot of work with Terry Kurtz in the alumni office. And the way I've said to you some recently, you know, the way we're set up, we have a VP for advancement and alumni affairs. Those things are together.
Right.
Probably the reason they're together is the money, because most of the money they raise that isn't a huge naming thing are from alumni. And when we first started that conversation, Terry was kind of like, well, it was sort of the thing, I'm really not hearing anything. Where that ended up though was that Terry and John and I got on the phone, and Terry ended up pulling all his stuff from the alumni records that we used to send out all that stuff. And his boss, Mike Grziak, is the VP for advancement and alumni affairs. And he's now willing to be talking about this in terms of money and fundraising and all that.
To be clear, and
so,
David and I met with him for, you know, an hour a couple of weeks ago. Mike is very soft on this project. It's we're going to give you, you know, we've given you permission to raise money for a design study, but you need to understand you have absolutely no permission for anything else. And you are not involved in making that decision about whether we go beyond that. So this is where I think there's a little subtlety, and we all know that David Orr's approach at some level is go way out on a limb, and so far out on that limb that people just have to back you because the world is, you know, the fierce commotion thing
And
out
that
there.
is well understood on campus. And we find ourselves in the context of the hotel. The hotel was commissioned and championed and rammed through in such this is the perception again. You know, I wasn't even here when that project thing, but boy, the stories that are being told about it. And so we just have to change happens at the speed of trust. So or something like that. So it's just, we need to like continue to navigate that, because what you're seeing is the staff side of it. And there's start talking about people. I feel, you know, I'm just saying, like, I can't get too far ahead of my boss.
There's a lot of psychology.
They'll just cut you off.
Why am I having flashbacks?
Can you tell us the story?
Let me give you the story of the hotel, because it is absolutely 100% relevant to this, which is that Marvin Krisloff, you know, David stopped teaching in the program and spent 5 or 6 years working for Marvin Krisloff, the then president. And his job was basically to raise money for the hotel. I never understood why David accepted that as a task. It never made any sense to me. But, you know, it's a green hotel. David took it on, and they did not raise all the money for the hotel that they had wanted to raise for the hotel. And here's where John Schofield comes back into the damn thing. He raised a fierce commotion about, you know, we're putting all this money into this stupid hotel, into faculty salaries and everything else that we should be putting money into. You know, we didn't have the commitments. This is all David Orr's fault. And then all the administration changed, and there was no narrative in the air except this sort of like, David Orr helped fuck us over on this hotel, but we never raised the money. We never raised enough money for it. So I didn't know this until, you know, not that long ago, but David Orr they don't understand David Orr as the man who like had his hands tied behind his back like Houdini and, you know, came up with $7 million to raise this building out of thin air. That's not the story. That's not the narrative they have. They have this narrative that David Orr was in charge of the hotel project and committed to raising money that he didn't raise, none of which is actually true. David was never in charge of that project, and they didn't even do it the way he wanted to do it. So he had his hands tied on that one too, in the sense that he had a vision. He wasn't allowed to sell the vision he had on that project. And it is absolutely not his fault what took place with that, because he wasn't the person in charge.
Okay,
But I'm just
sorry,
saying, that's
I
the
don't
whole
actually
world.
want the normal story or the your story. I want to hear, what are they all upset about? Like,
They're
what
upset
do
that-
they think David Orr is? Do they
That
think
he is, that he sells a big picture,
and
that-
it doesn't follow through?
or that what actually winds up is a cake that's not fully baked. So
Okay.
it looks beautiful and you cut into it and it's gooey in the middle, and it might be sweet as all get out, but it's
But you
not
don't wanna
really
eat it,
cake.
And it's,
Yeah,
and then you're
and
gonna
trying
be
to
stuck
serve it to
dealing
other
with it.
people.
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
And there's
So-
cleanup after.
This whole the cleanup, the hotel, so we're in the middle now
Yeah,
of
okay.
recommissioning the hotel. The GeoWell field, that whole system, it is not functioning well at all. It's a mess. But it's
Yeah.
not just the hotel, but what I'm saying is it is sullied, for example, LEED. We have a board commitment for LEED, you say LEED Gold, it's LEED Silver, for capital projects. We have a new Woodland Residence Hall, 402 beds, that'll come online this summer. This fall will be the first time students are in there. Designed to LEED Gold. Okay, class, is it LEED? No. I was an organic farmer. I was a certified organic farmer. That's why I can say I was an organic farmer.
Right.
But people will, so it's a little bit of my point is that the hotel sullied green building and the appetite for it, all the way down to the landscape. I mean, Mile Lynn,
Right.
how can you have, I mean, to me, it's just like, wow, you had Mile Lynn like involved on campus, like, and it's a good joke. It's a
Yeah,
running
it's a
joke.
joke. It's awful.
And so that's where we are. And so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's slower than we want, but we are seeing progress. You're seeing staff come around to it. There's great value here. OES, my office, is working with Cindy on behavior change, not for Cindy, but for campus. For campus, because it's the people, it's how we steward. In our case, we're talking about carbon neutrality because that's what's, the new thing. But we all have a stake in this and how we care for it. And that's this ongoing work. And so that's something I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that's frustrating.
All of this is context, though. You gotta, this may seem like a little bit of a gripe session, but this is the world we're living in on campus. And it is, it is what it is. And unfortunately, they don't see David as like, well, he can just go out and raise money, because they feel for completely wrong reasons that they were burned
Yeah.
by his involvement in the project, which is so unfair, but it's
Sure.
just reality.
That's
Perception, yeah,
a
perception of
cheap
reality.
comment. I guess I'm just looking at Kevin and thinking like, yeah, how many times have we heard
It's the
the same
flashback.
story of like buildings that, you raise a certain amount of money, you have a big vision, a big dream, all of those things, and then in operation doesn't do what, so like that's it's,
Mhm.
yeah, which isn't to say that it doesn't matter, it's to say like, we know how to deal with that, but it's also worth saying that this is not a clean slate. These are people who've been burned before by things not going well.
So because both Rumi and Russ have their cards up, but I don't know which way we want to go, because you talked about saying something and then having Lindsay talk, but
I think we should keep.
Ruby's been patient.
Rumi
Yeah.
and Russ, and then
Yeah, I mean, I'll start from the beginning of this conversation. In terms of administration, I see there are several layers, right? So there is the dean who's been, from my perspective, moderately supportive.
No, he's been
He's excited about it. So in some ways, he's an ally. Yeah, but his ability to push it through is limited, right? So the next level, you have the VP finance and the facilities planning, that group needs to be on board. And I think they've been on board somewhat, but they're not as enthusiastically as, say, the dean, right? And then you have the advancement and alumni office, and that's where, as John said, there's a lot of sort of like skepticism, or
But they simply follow
Right.
the fundraising,
Yeah.
they're not a problem or an issue when you do it, because they simply follow.
right, but still, they're another group that
Right.
that needs to be on board, and then you have the president and the board of directors. So that's kind of the lay of the land, and for something as big as this to move through, you have to make sure you have buy-in and consistent understanding of what we're trying to do, what the scope of the project is, how we plan to materialize it. That information needs to consistently be shared and understood by all of those different groups for this to happen. Regarding the hotel and David, I mean, it's, I'll add some information, but the narrative remains the same, is that I think, we had a lot of turnover in our administration, right? So, board changes over time. We have a different president now than who was there when the hotel project started. Ron Watts was the VP Finance, was very involved in that process, is no longer here. So the institutional memory that, say, someone like John has is very different from everybody else.
Well, they don't have
up there.
institutional memory.
Right, so they don't. So they go by narratives, and sometimes, like, good stories get suppressed by sort of like, negative information. So on the one hand, you can say that, yes, it's true that the hotel initial estimate of cost ended up costing significantly more than that. The initial commitment from David that he's going to raise a lot of money, he raised a lot of money, but at the same time, what my understanding is that along the way, some of the design goals changed that kind of like stymied his ability to fully get all his funding sources on board, because he was talking about a story and then the story changed. So but the fact remains is that he probably raised in the order of $13 to $14 million. So no other faculty member at Oberlin has ever been involved in raising that kind of money for anything.
Right.
And my personal perspective of David, which is like very different from what people at up there have, is that when I came to Oberlin, this existed. It was inspirational to me. When I was interviewing, David was talking about this vision for a student-initiated project in downtown Oberlin, the East College Street project, where Slow Train is. Wasn't there, but it was just just budding, and he talked about it, and it was very inspirational to me, and it happened. And by the time that was underway, David was talking about the hotel project, and the hotel happened. It didn't happen the way David envisioned, but it happened. Like, this is somebody who can actually get things done. A lot of people say big things, but not all of them are able to actually deliver on those big things.
Right.
So the trick, I think, is to, as we want to develop that shared understanding across those different layers of administration that we need to have on board, how do we develop confidence in this project by partially correcting some of the misunderstanding, but you probably don't want to go down the rabbit hole. It's a very tricky situation where you kind of balance the understanding of the narrative that's causing the reluctance in the administration. I don't know if that's helpful.
That's
but
super helpful. Yeah, really helpful.
Ross?
So we have a couple of paths here, this whole process, approval, fundraising, RFP. I feel like I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, I could say stuff, but it's not based on any real knowledge or any analysis that adds value. And then we have the what is the scope of where we want to go and how can we best leverage changes to this building to tell a story of renewal and recommissioning, et cetera. I feel like I can add something to that, and I suspect Kevin is in a similar bag, although he more closely observed the university 25 years ago, or the college 25 years ago, but it seems like so much has changed that, I'm not sure how valuable that is.
Right.
Lindsay, I think you're kind of a little in between there because you have an interest as an alum and maybe some perspective on the administration. Walt, deeply involved in the alumni affairs, so I think you may have valuable strategic information. I wonder if we should bifurcate and take advantage of I'm happy to sit here for the conversation about the strategy of the fundraising, but I don't think I can add much. But I'd love to spend time thinking about what the scope might be and how we can best leverage changes to this building to tell the story of renewal. So anyway, I offer that as a suggestion.
I feel like that's, do I need to wave something? I feel like that, Russ, would make the best use of the expertise we have in the room this morning. That scope, that second part, because we've had great discussion. To distill that down would be great. And then that will help as we're entering into fundraising discussions as well, but those are other sets of folks, etc. But right now, like I say, it's helped the rest of campus realize, or at least leadership realize, there's some there, here's what it is, what's some next steps. And I just feel like it's those incremental things just to kind of help them get their head around it, and we still are making progress because that will lead to something.
Lindsay and John,
Let me go first because I think Lindsay's got a lot to say that I think is going to be valuable, and I just want to talk strategy a little bit. I agree with the idea. There's no point in talking more about internals of Oberlin. I think that was simply necessary as context for thinking about where we are and what's possible. I think we work towards a single document which has two functions. One being external, getting the world excited about what we do, and the other being internal. And I feel like there's enough ambiguity in what Joe Komar was saying yesterday that it's okay for us to just pursue one vision here. And he can later on and say, yeah, I only want to think about the mechanicals on this building. That's fine. But to me, I think what we need is to take the program statement and create a set of sections out of it which address different topics that we think need addressed in this, which is not unparalleled to the systems document and sort of all of our discussions. It's really sort of like more concrete in terms of we need part of this study needs to be about interior design at some level and thinking through spaces internally. Part of it needs to be about various aspects of the landscape. Obviously, part of it needs to be about mechanicals and stuff. Part of it needs to be about lighting. Like, what is the expertise and what are the goals in each of these? So it's just a lot more fleshed out in terms of specific ideas. The ideas about energy storage, information about the lab. So we've painted the full picture of things that at some level, I guess, from their perspective, things that you need to put dollars on so that you could then make some priorities and decisions about what you're going to do. Maybe it's got a section on living building challenge and say, here's an opportunity where we could pursue something within this context that could have some major advantages in terms of raising a lot of PR, among other things, about the building that we've done this. So I think that if we spent the rest of our day today working on fleshing out what are the central pieces in these different systems that we need more analysis on, so that we need harder numbers and set of options on. I think we could just use that as the RFP. And again, maybe facilities is going to say, for the scope of this RFP, we want to take out these things. But then they're making a decision to do that, and we've stuck with the larger vision that we want, and we know what they're taking out or not taking out. Anyways, that's kind of my take on what a good strategy would be. but I'm real curious to hear about this. And I do think that, so this would be a single document that we use internally, but also we circulate more broadly, to the world, so that we begin to create a little bit of a commotion, about this, and people saying, hey, these guys are thinking about some heavy issues here that a lot of buildings are going to need to be thinking about.
Lindsay,
Yeah, so I think it would be a good use of time today to scope out what the analysis RFP scope is. And I think I think we're at that point where we could probably write that out and get the ball rolling on that. I written some notes yesterday. It's going to be things like a more advanced thermal comfort analysis to try to understand how, essentially what's the current state. And then sort of, you're going to also want, okay, so I guess I'm just going to break this down a little bit because I think there are actually a lot of different steps involved. Getting people to come in, like, to do these analyses, acoustics, that kind of thermal comfort stuff, some analysis that says, okay, here are your existing energy systems. Can they be replaced? That's all pure analysis, and it ends in some reports that say, this is what it is. I think that will spend all the money. That will spend all the money that's been raised. Somewhere, what is it, 250, 300,000?
It'll spend half of the money that's been raised, but that's okay.
What, you mean we can't spend it all?
No, we could spend up to 300, I think.
Yes. So
We
I'm
actually
saying,
have more money than that, it turns
Yeah.
out.
oh, okay. So
Right.
$300,000, I think it will take a $300,000 to do that type of analysis, if not more, because these analyses that you're talking about are not ones that many people are qualified to do. They're expensive firms, they're rare firms. There's not going to be a lot of people that apply to do them. They're going to be flying from somewhere. It's going to be cool, and there should probably be some scope for them to like publish and speak at conferences, not to actually like send them to the conferences, but they're going to want to do a public white paper at the end of it and talk about all this stuff. So like that's $300,000 easily. That's
Just point of
not,
clarification on that. Can we hire a firm that has so that it's like one central entity that's sort of like facilitating all these things?
and
or
then
you
they
think-
can sub it out to
Yeah,
other
okay,
specialists.
Okay, right.
They're not going to tell you what furniture to buy. They're not going to tell you, they may tell you what like a spec for a window or something that they're going to replace. They're not going to get you to the point of even having schematic ideas of what to do next. They're just
No.
going to do the analysis. And then they're going to say, here's the current state of the building.
It's electrical energy systems you need to separate from mechanical because they're just different. There's the storage of electricity and PV system. It's a different world.
So getting a finding result that says this is how this building is doing, and showing that analysis is happening with students, with leaders in the field, etc. It'll be helpful to build some buzz. It's not going to sell a vision at all. It's not going to say this is so cool. We're going to do this super cool new thing. It's going to be this resilience hub for the future. I think that's a very separate workflow to try to start coming up with, like, why are we doing all of this analysis on this existing building? It's because we want to fundamentally change it and make it into something new. And that thing is going to be, somewhere Living Building Challenge could be incorporated in the analysis side. You can literally say to them, give us a sense of what it's going to take to get to Living Building Challenge full certification. That's fine. But it's not going to tell the vision. It's not going to say,
No.
Here's how this is going to be pedagogical. These are all of the different classes that we want to, and it's not going to be like, this isn't going to be convincing to raise money. This is just going to tell you it's cold in there. The acoustics are a problem in the classrooms. Here's how much they're a problem. It's just different things. And so I think it's very smart to start with the analysis stuff because it's going to take time. I guess, Chris, I think to your point, as long as we're all on the same page that this is probably like a 5-year project or something, maybe 6 or 7 to get the analysis, which is like maybe a year, especially if you want students involved and you want to craft some classes around all the analysis
I think we
projects.
do.
And then, you know, or like a year and a half from now or something, because you're gonna do them all of academic next year, or something along those lines. I don't know if it's too late to add classes to next year's academic calendar, but like that kind of stuff. And then you're gonna know how the building's doing, and then you'll be able to price it. You'll know then, do we want to replace the windows? Like some of those decisions are such huge cost implications. It's not just fine tuning once you get the analysis done. It's the analysis is actually going to tell you, is this a $2 million project or is it a $20 million project? Not to mention the conversations that have to take place once you're actually looking at how the building is doing. Like if you find out that there are some, you know, that the building, that there's actually a bunch that seems totally fine and you don't want to change it at all, that's great, but there needs to be some second stage, I think, of saying, okay, what do we actually want to do here now that we understand the conditions of things, or I don't know, all of that. So that's, meanwhile, you can start fundraising, because what people are gonna wanna know is there a compelling project here that has a pedagogical value? Is, you know, I mean, it just kind of depends on who you find, but like, is there someone who really cares about environmental education, who you have access to, and who's gonna start to foot the bill? That can all start, even if you're not making a commitment to say it's gonna be exactly this scope and this is exactly what the price tag is, and, you know, but like, I think, I guess I'm just sort of imagining how I think realistically it's gonna come together. And I don't think we're going to, like, I don't know that, well, first of all, there's also the question of like, who's going out to do the fundraising? Who's gonna be the person, you know, making the ask of these people, or kind of being the David Orr of this project? If David's not gonna be the David Orr of this project. And so that person could go ahead and get started now on sort of building some of these relationships, but it's gonna be a while until you have like a price tag or something like that you really know you can scope out and do. I guess like we've been working with Yale on the project. It's $25 million. It took them 8 years to raise the money. Then they broke ground. I don't know how it will work for you all, but like, yeah, it can be quite long, and it can be quite sort of like stop and go. And so I guess I'm mostly saying this to just make sure everyone's like, are we really gonna do this? Because it's a lot. And I think I will say what Russ said really resonates with me, which is like, definitely here to help figure out what needs to happen with the building. And I'm happy to like tell you what my experiences have been with fundraising. But ultimately, we're mostly going to be resources to help you think about the building itself, like what can be done on the building, and the strategy of how you actually like raise this money and get all of your internal stakeholders and things isn't really what we're going to be able to help with very much at all. Like we don't know, and we also won't be the ones raising the money. So you may need to have separate conversations about that and come up with, yeah, like who are your pipeline of potential people you're going to talk to. David has a relationship with the Waltons, that kind of thing. But that's like, there's not a whole lot that we can do to help there, because we're not believable. We're not going to fundraise for it directly, right? Someone's got to fundraise for it directly. Those are all of my like big brain dump things. But I think, yeah, if the RFP is the next step, which totally makes sense to me, I think we should focus on making sure we can get to that scope of work and get somebody making nice documents that make this feel real.
Russ,
This building is an historical artifact. It represents best thinking that we had as an industry 25 years ago. I find it very interesting. I find it gratifying that someone wants to revisit that. And I find it interesting to see where we are in the context of where we've been. That now with 30 years of the green building industry behind us, depending on what you want to call the beginning of this modern green building movement. This building has already played a very important role in that history and in the discussion. And I'd like to have the story told of how this 25-year reimagining is in the context of that. I think in the end, that may be part of making your argument to your administration board. I think it is also part of making the argument to prospective donors. But I think it is also, and perhaps most importantly, part of moving forward green building to be able to say, this is what we knew then, here's the systems, it was the best we can do. Look what's happened in 25 years. We've got better glass, we've got better PVs, we know this. Biophilia,
Right.
Who was talking about that 25 years ago? And we can sort of tick through and say, we're going to take advantage of what we learned. What we learned was a result of buildings like this that were pioneers at the time, and it pushed us forward. And the place that it has pushed us to is now, and we're going to incorporate that. I think it's a fascinating story to tell. It doesn't really fall into any of the buckets of deliverables from this, but to me, it's the most interesting part of the whole thing. It might, yeah, be part of your persuasion. It is definitely part of the PR effort down the road, because that's what people are going to want to say. I gotta think that there isn't a serious person in the green building world who doesn't know about this building. To put it in the context of, let's use that as a marker to tell us what we've learned in 25 years. I think that's totally fascinating. And I would be interested in being part of that, of telling that story.
I totally agree. And I guess one thing I want to say is I think it's important to distinguish between the fact that this building captures the attention of the green building community, and there's a lot of people who will want to help to sort of think about it or just generally celebrate it, and large chunks of money. And I think, so just as long as we know that those are not one and the same, like a lot of the money that did come to the green building movement from a philanthropic perspective has since sort of retired or moved on to other things. And so just because it's something that the movement loves doesn't really open a lot of doors right now from a fundraising perspective, unfortunately. And so, but yes, to everything else, like it's got such philosophical power to it that should be.
So I have a short thing first. We have a weird malady at Oberlin in my experience when it comes to fundraising, and that is that we don't tell anybody what we're really interested in raising money for. And when they find out, I mean, there's a bunch of people who don't even know this building exists in Oberlin and alumni. And so I think we need the description of where we're going. I think we need that whole thing to really move forward. I know a bunch of people who, if they read that, they'd get excited. And right now they wouldn't have that basis. So I think we've done it too many times already. When I talk to people and they say, "You doing what?" And they're like, "Well, I'd be happy to support that in a bunch of different ways." So anyway, I think it's really important that we get this RFP thing, I think, and it doesn't just talk about what needs to be done in this building, but it talks about the thing that I keep saying, and John's written well about for me, and that is Oberlin, SIP, the whole carbon neutral. But there's a whole bunch of alumni who don't even know that we have a commitment to being carbon neutral. I mean, it sounds strange, but I think that's true. And I think a lot of people today would respond to that. So I've got John and Rumi.
Okay, mine up this way.
I think there's not necessarily disagreement, Lindsay, with sort of your thinking about like, we got to figure all this stuff out and the larger vision. I think that, you know, the piece I'm thinking about basically builds on what I've written, but fleshes out all this stuff. It is both of those things. It's a vision about why we should do something here. And it's a sort of like, this is what needs to get us done. This is what needs to get us to a point where we know what choices we have in front of us and how much it's going to cost. Like, so I think those are actually kind of just one and the same. But to Russ's point, which is I think really, really essential here, is this needs to be a big story. This is all about narrative. And you know, when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to getting people excited, it's all about a really good narrative. And to me, that narrative, you know, just building on what Russ said, it's about models of change. How does change occur in this world? And what role did the AJLC have in changing the world? And I think that's not a difficult story to tell. It had a huge influence on the green building movement. It is still the icon. If you point towards an icon, it's this damn building. It's in the environmental studies textbooks, right? That's what you see in there. And the story that hasn't, I think, been told to the world, so that's known within the green building movement. The story that hasn't been told is, and immediately after that, you know, we had the first carbon neutral study on any campus about how does a campus become carbon neutral in the 2020 story. And we worked closely with the city of Oberlin to acquire, you know, a green energy mix. And we developed a comprehensive environmental policy for Oberlin College, which was the first in the country. And we were the first institution to make a commitment to carbon neutrality as an institution. And we achieved that through major infrastructure that builds directly on this building. All of those things extend out from this building. That's the story. The story is all of that. And that's the story that actually explains why it's so damn important to do what we're talking about doing here, because it's our next opportunity to create a revised model of change, updated to the climate crisis that we're in the midst of right now. And then that's our next launching point. To me, that's a very clear narrative. And it's the reason why this institution to do this, because it's like, you know, we're going to get a lot of attention on this institution. And that's what an institution needs, because we need more students come here. They pay the bills. They get excited about this. I don't think it's hard to get other people to get money. And I hear what you're saying, Lindsay, about the money's not going to come out of the green building movement. The green building movement itself does not contain money. I think the story I just told brings money in from people who are not in the green building movement. However, with that said, I think the green building movement does need to have buzz around this, because that's part of bringing that money in. So I think it's kind of a narrative and a model of change, and telling that story of how this is so much bigger than this building. And it's obvious how it's much bigger than this building. And that's why we need the phase 2, because that too will end up sending ripples out into the world and be much bigger than this building.
So I don't know, were you shaking, or because Rumi and then you?
Well, I was wondering, Rumi, if I could speak, because I want to be adjacent to Lindsay as kind of a follow-on to what she was saying. Because I think I'm thinking about this process, almost the image that's coming to mind is, and maybe it's not a good one, but it's an iceberg. That we're looking at the thing that's here, and it might be a beautiful thing to approach, and we can describe it and all. We all know, and you pointed out really well, there's this other thing below the water that's enormous and dangerous and different, you know, but it's part of the same iceberg. So there's a fractal nature to everything that we're talking about, that, or a chicken and egg quality of you need this to be able to get to that. I think Lindsay's right in the kind of just wide-eyed. These things take a long time, potentially. They take a lot of money, they take a lot of analysis. I think that's absolutely right. Russ and I worked on a project that was so inspired by the AJLC at American University, School of International Service, 8-9-year project. You know, stops and starts and fundraising issues and their version of administrative chaos and presidents being changed, you know, the whole thing around it. We hung on and we got it through, but it was a bear, you know. And it wasn't the exact building we wanted, but they loved what they got. But, you know, so these things do take time. My sense, though, is there is a way, maybe, to do a quicker version of what 300, 500, whatever that front end piece is, to describe the fractal of the entire thing that we're looking at. It's not going to be precise. So you could zoom in on it. There can be so many unknowns, but there is enough of a story here to give some evidence of the vision. And I think it could include what really has to happen throughout the entire design phase is this resonance between analysis and synthesis. What are we studying? What are the metrics around it? How do we synthesize? Analyze, synthesize. And I think you can do, and I may be wildly optimistic about this, but I had projects at McDonough's where you'd have a short order to create a vision and you just have to pull it together as the best you can do. I think it's possible to do a vision that captures enough analysis on the big items there to say, these are the things, this isn't exactly what we're going to do, but these are the opportunities and constraints within what you need to do around glazing, shading, So I think that there's the potential to do that and to even give some type of compelling visual of what that change might be. It could be back to, one of the options is a trellis, and it touches then on the biophilic shading factors, and it deals with it. We don't, is that the exact thing that's going to happen? We don't know, but there's something compelling there. The way furnishing might enliven this town square, the way that town, you know, the story of town and community coming here, you know, that you can give a vision to that. So I think it's possible. That the other thing, though, I would say is this RFP is like being on the receiving end of that. We could name a lot of really capable firms, architecture, engineering, and I'd say it's a triad, and landscape. Those are the key people that you need to come together here. You're on the receiving end of that. I don't know who jumps at the opportunity to engage in this or not. You know, it could be super compelling for people, or it's like, I don't know, I really want to touch that. I don't, you know, but all you can do is put out the most attractive RFP that you can and see what kind of interest you get. The one thing I feel, though, is, and I had this echoing in my mind from the minute David called me last summer about something's brewing, and then conversations in December is, boy, I hope the best thing for you all is you do excite and you have the chance to vet and select that right triad, because you want them along for the ride. And you want them to not miss out on many more of these conversations, because they have insights that we're here for a day. We, you know, will be a phone call if you need to chat. We're not the ones that need to, even like, you need that team there, and they need to know who's the leadership, who's guiding us, how do we, they're going to be savvy about, yeah, these things, you know, administrative and all. We know that they're rocky things to engage, but I think I think you could get, and knowing full well, and everybody has to be wide-eyed that it's not going to be what happens in schematics. It's not going to be the deep dive. And please have the contingency in your funding to say plus X, Y, Z, because it's going to be more, you know, 5-10 years down the road.
That wasn't an editorial comment.
Yeah.
This is the online.
It came unplugged and I just had to reboot.
Ben, can we get that goddamn thing fixed?
Kevin, I
So I've got
I like that.
Rumi, Lindsay, and John. I don't know if John's just left it up or you.
He just left it.
Are you trying to
That's
figure out the
likes
Zoom
to-
showing up on the?
We're all
TV
okay.
screen?
We're all okay.
Should I go?
Yeah, go.
All right, so I want to get into the ENVS 499 mode and, and look at the board and then comment on it. First of all, if I didn't capture something, please let me know. But I was thinking that there are two aspects to it. One is analyzing, learning about the building itself, all of its systems, and what are the opportunities for improvements there. And I think that's super important in relation to what Russ was saying earlier, or John was saying, about the history of this building, the legacy of that building. So part of what we're trying to do here is to honor that legacy for another 25 years, right? So making sure that this building is performing at its best and, for another 25 years. And then the other aspect of this is the vision, the innovative aspect of it, where we introduce new ideas, new systems into this that will inspire for another 25 years, right? And I feel that those two need to go hand in hand. So that's my first comment. The second comment is the audience for this. I know that we're talking about the RFP, but I see there are almost like three different audiences here. One is people who are going to give money to the projects. They need to be inspired. Two, the document needs to have enough clarity so that it can support the RFP, so that those triage of groups can look at it and understand what we're trying to do. And
What's the ask?
yeah, what's the ask? And then the third one is those 4 layers of administration in the college,
Mhm.
because we also need to sell it to them, right? We need energy from here. So that's, I think, as we try to synthesize these 2 days into a document that has these details. And I should recognize that in terms of the history of this building, in terms of the legacy, John's done a fabulous job of documenting that in the document that we already have. In terms of all the other sustainability initiatives at Oberlin, I think it's already there. So it's, we don't need to reinvent that part. We need to add the specifics that we're looking at that's coming out of these 2 days. I added one here, number 7, the facade, the exterior presentation, because I know that the college, the administration cares about it. Like when I was chair, and John, you felt this, when we were talking about this building with the dean or admissions or others, they're concerned about how it presents itself when prospective students walk through this or parents come here. So that's another aspect of this. And the architect people in the room, like another look at the exterior shell, how it presents. We talked about how some of it is dirty. These are little things, but they matter for somebody who's just approaching the building. And can we do something that makes it easier to maintain? So that it presents itself well. What can we make visible outside of the building? So for example, if you've been to the Middlebury campus, there wood-fired the
Boiler, their
boiler.
central heating plant.
The entire boiler is behind a glass shell, so that anyone can see what's inside. So if we develop battery storage microgrid, if it's an extension to the building, can that be like visible from the outside? Somebody walking by can actually, even without entering the building, see those systems behind some kind of glass enclosure. So those are some of the additional things to think about. And I'm happy to add to the notes as you just ask me, and I'll do it.
So Lindsay,
Lighting / daylight.
Yeah, I have a couple to maybe add to that list,
Sure.
but I'm gonna say a different thing here. Kevin, I really like what you're saying, and I think maybe what I want to do is put a modification on the suggestion of what to do with the money that is available. I think you could, especially if there's a little bit more than 100 or 300,000. It would be nice at this phase to say that this phase was going to result in some completed analysis, including student engagement in that, a preliminary vision, essentially something that's going to, that could be the same term, but it would be a different deliverable than just saying this is the current state. It would be like a preliminary, something that really articulates this is what it could be in its next era. And then I want to make a final suggestion that kind of just popped into my head while Rumi was talking, which is that I think you maybe need like a change management consultant to help here who is really interested in and wants to take responsibility for the process of having all of this come into being over the next few years. Because I think a couple things. One is I get the sense that those folks that are really going to be here on a day-to-day basis and want to engage, and a consultancy, whether like a Smith Group, or maybe it's like some coalition and it's led by Perkinsville, or maybe it's a PAE and then they sub out a bunch of stuff. Whatever that is, they are not going to necessarily help you think through what kind of meetings should you all be having regularly in order to get the right people internally on board? What's the fundraising pitch going to look like? When does it start? Who are the students that are involved? Is there a committee? Are there multiple committees? What are we doing? What are we not doing? All of that stuff, it seems like it would be useful for you to maybe pay somebody to like help you think through all of these different parallel paths so that they all weave together really nicely. I think those are all some of the things that are jumbling around in my head. And I'll just say, like, I don't have the bandwidth to help figure all that out, but I also don't really have I just think it's a significant enough job, the process job of how this is all gonna come together and what everybody needs to be doing it, in different lanes along the way. So that's a suggestion. Like, could you pay somebody? There's probably some really great people who could do that for you so that Rumi can be focused on just like, what are the things, and you're gonna have a monthly meeting in which you're gonna go through, like, whatever that is, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of thinking that could go into just a good process and making sure everybody's firing on all cylinders. But yeah, it's also a plus one to what Kevin is saying. I think a good firm, the sooner they're here, the more helpful, and you can make it an explicit deliverable as a part of the RFP that a vision comes out of it. It's just, they wouldn't assume that a vision was going to come out of an analysis project like that. They need to really clearly say, and also we want you to tell us what to do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just I was waving about, and Russ, I'm trying to think of the firms when there were institutional projects for museum projects, there were consultants that just do the shepherding of how we get museums done. And I don't know if that exists in the Greenwood. There's a market for that.
I was sort of thinking about people at Google that did that work. Like, I feel like you did in some ways, but then there's people like Clark Brockman or other people, who are around who want to help you think about how to manifest it and how to think about all this.
Jumping to the owner side of the table to help be a good owner.
Clark would be great.
Yeah. John, did you?
Sure. I actually think the vision is what goes into the document, and that can be refined by the firm we hire. I don't actually think we're lacking in vision. I think we got the vision. I think the question is, exactly what are we doing to fulfill that vision? I don't think the vision is that unclear in terms of what we're doing.
I think, and what I'm maybe saying is, at the end of the analysis, they're going to say, we're going to replace the windows and we're going to add an extension off the side of the building that does X, Y, and Z, and the landscape's going to be completely redone and made into a forest. So like, it's some of the bigger moves of what you're actually going to do that they would suggest what those things are so that you can fundraise with a little bit more of a vision, a picture of what happens. Because otherwise you'll be fundraising on the acoustics are a problem, the thermal comfort is a
Right.
problem, and we want to make this a resilient
See,
hub.
maybe I'm completely off base. I think we have a pretty good vision now. I think the question is what needs done and how much it's gonna cost. And that's actually what we need to get to that next stage. We're not starting with any sort of a blank slate here of any kind. We're starting with tons of history and a very clear goal of what we want the next phase to be. This is not a sort of like, we've got bare ground here and a bunch of really ambiguous ideas. We know what our vision is. We don't know how to do it, and we don't know how much it's gonna cost, and we don't know who's gonna pay for it.
Right, you're
So
saying the same thing, and I think this is just as far as like these construction projects and stuff, that's where the orientation is, I think, for that, yeah, it's not gonna come from them. It's gonna come from the vision is
Yeah, and I
here,
think
like I say, but
it's
they
already
will-
here now, frankly.
Exactly,
I think
exactly.
all we need to do is, and I think thinking about this as like a 5-year project, man, I think that's death. I'm just gonna be honest with you. If we paint this as like, we're talking the next 5 years, the fact is that, we just finished this massive SIP project. We need this building, this location, this center to function as the centerpiece of communicating that. That's not a 5 years from now thing. That's a
Right,
year
and I
from
think
I
now.
guess
that
I just,
there's some-
but the thing I think is like, okay. You're not gonna, I'm not the billionaire, like the billionaire that you're pitching to isn't gonna wanna, first of all, just to like, there were a couple of things I was thinking about earlier. This is not the campus in the United States that to a billionaire looks like the most sustainable campus in the United States. We were talking about this at breakfast. It's partially because you don't tell the story, but it's partially because there are many other universities with larger budgets than you that say that they're doing that and have a lot more money to say that they're doing that. And so that's who the billionaires think. It's Stanford and it's Harvard, basically. So you're not going to win that. Billionaires don't give money to people who think they're already the best. They give money to people who think that they're scrappy and they're going to do something really cool that they haven't done yet. Definitely true. So they're not going to give you money because you are essentially already, you've already done all the things.
That's the right-hand column.
So, right, so this right-hand column, they're gonna wanna hear more than Resilience Hub in Oberlin, Ohio. They need to know more than that to make it sound like it's gonna be this project that's gonna have an impact on an international scale or on a national scale. Energy storage, microgrid, living building challenge, these are all things. Yale's doing it, Princeton's doing it, Harvard's doing it, Stanford's doing it. They're all doing it. They all have billionaires. So what's your unique angle on it that is essentially going to make that work? That's the pitch that you don't have yet is what makes it different from everyone else, and you can't use what you've already done because they don't like funding the past. They want to fund the future. They want to fund the thing that hasn't happened yet. They need to know that their money is going to do a thing, not to reinforce a sense of self that already exists. So like, it's got to be, and that's where I think this idea that this become, like if this is the first step towards this space on campus that's going to immerse people in the problems of the future as climate becomes worse and worse and climate, events and disasters become worse and worse. This is the space in which these problems are going to be solved first, because we're a scrappy Midwestern town that can try things at a scale that the Stanfords and Harvards of the world can't do. Like that kind of thing.
I don't think we're competing with Stanford and Harvard at all. I don't think that's it's not like every billionaire in the world is looking at us and looking at Harvard and Stanford and deciding which one to fund. We're always going to be niche. It was a niche funds that raised the money for this. It's particular individuals, particular relationships. I don't think it's a question of like, we're competing against every institution in the world. We're trying to tell a story that attracts specific individuals to give money. And it's an idiosyncratic pathway to get there exactly as it was for this initial building. We're not competing. Harvard, what they do is irrelevant to us. We're a different scale. We're in the Midwest. It's a different world. And we're we're not competing with that. We're not competing with Harvard and Stanford. They're not our competition.
Okay. Then you don't have to, but I think so if you're gonna fundraise with people that already, like, that are Ohio, right, like, then you're fine, or something like that. I guess maybe part of what I'm saying is like, I'm maybe just making some assumptions that are coming out of, like, I think a little bit of what David's been saying and a little bit of like what, the involvement of Amory, for example, and what his role is in all of this. Those are the people that he knows, right? Like, those are the climate funders. So if he were here, maybe he could kind of reset this. But my sense is that you would want to be going after that type of funder for this. And so, and the question of whether it's 5 years or 2 years, I think it does have to do with the scope of work and the dollar amount to some degree. So like, if, maybe we just have a slight different understanding of how much this is gonna cost, or like how much money you guys can raise without going to some of these like really deep pockets. But at least from what I understand of these kinds of large building projects and like wanting a multi-million-dollar donation from somebody, it's a pretty small handful of people who give that a dollar amount, more than $1 million in the country, and so they do care about whether it's a Harvard or a Stanford or something like that. But if you're not going after those and you think you can get that kind of money without those types of people, then do it, go for it. I still think you're gonna have to make the pitch, though, that this is really something new and different and not just a reinforcement.
Totally.
I think the pitch to
That's
say,
what I think we should focus on, is what can we do that does push it over that edge of being new and different.
New and different.
But I think it's not as abstract as I think we're trying to make this right now. Can I just directly respond to this?
Yeah.
Because when we talk
we're
about
going
like
round
who's gonna
the
raise
circle.
money
Yeah.
for this, honest to God, I don't think we can do this without David Orr. I think that's it's not an abstraction of who's doing this. It's not me, it's not Rumi. We don't have the connections. We can't do that. This is a David Orr deal. It just is.
But does he want to do it? Can he do it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That David
Okay,
ordeal,
sorry.
that's just a minor side.
PNBS 499.
Yeah, well, Kevin's got-
Just to get your attention. What I'm taking away from this conversation is, first of all, we don't know who's going to give the money, and we can debate about who that person is, but we won't know until we do more work, we reach out, we do the fundraising drive, and so on. But what I'm taking away from Lindsay's suggestions, and Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, is that I feel that we have, as John said, we have a pretty good idea about the vision, what we want to accomplish. But what I'm hearing is that we need to communicate that idea with more specifics, with more concrete vision about what this resilience hub mean. How are all of these going to come together into a vision that other people who don't know the history and reading it for the first time, hearing the pitch, can get inspired. Is that part of what you were suggesting?
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. They will help me articulate some of this or tell me that I'm wrong. It's not so much specifics for me. It's differentiation. It's saying, David, I was just saying that I was wishing you were here to try to weigh in on what.
Yeah, I know.
What
I was
we're-
reading your thoughts. So
Yeah, great. Yeah. So what I think it needs to be in order to fundraise is it's a focus on some of these new things, and it's saying why Oberlin? Why is this going to be the best way to spend your money? And so sometimes specifics help. Because sometimes you can say we're gonna, specifically this thing is gonna do something that no one's ever done before. But it's not like saying, well, the resilience hub is specifically gonna address flooding, and we're gonna have a berm, and we're gonna do and this is gonna get connected to that. That's not the specifics I'm talking about. I think it's why is it unique? And how big can you make the vision? How much can you say? And this opens the door for us to be able to create, you
So
know,
what would
the
change?
first campus of the future that does such and such a thing. But like, yeah, so anything you can say there, and I think, the differentiation is gonna involve this question of the people that are gonna drive this, like, the people need to understand you guys are gonna take this into the future and make this become a reality, and people are gonna wanna get behind you as people who are making this happen and making it feel unique.
David, just to give you 30 seconds on this, like earlier we talked about two kinds of things that need to be done. One is an analysis of this building to honor its legacy. What can we do to make it relevant for another 25 years? Existing systems, so thermal comfort, acoustics, and lighting, and mechanical systems, what upgrades, and all of that stuff. And then there's another aspect of innovative new visions and new things that get incorporated in AJLC for the next 25 years. And that's where becoming a resilience hub and introducing new ideas and systems like energy storage and microgrid, and maybe pursue the living building challenge. Lots of new pedagogical opportunities, making things visible, and all of those things come under there. And how do we balance those two into a vision that we can sell to Oberlin College administration, to the potential funders, and also draw potential architects and consulting firms who would be excited to submit an RFP, respond to the RFP for this project.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So you decided not to tear it down?
So
That's
far.
still open.
But I mean, to the point about scope, though, I do think we really need to unpack this question of like this is like you all are fueling this. You're directing it. Do you want it to take 2 years? Is what's most important to you that it be a scope of work that can happen in 2 to 3 years, or is it that you're saying you think that the grand scope of everything you think it can happen in 3 years, and I think it's going to happen in 8 years, and we just disagree. Because like it doesn't matter if I think it's going to take longer. If it takes less time, like great, I'll buy you a beer. But like, I want to make sure we're talking about the same scope.
So I've got Kevin.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, I wonder if, in addition to the list, if there just begins a sort of timeline Gantt chart of things, because the timeframes, the 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever, we don't know, but we know within that specific components or exercises can have a manageable period of time, and we have a product. The gaskets between timeframes is, you got something to sell, how long does it take for somebody to give you the money?
Right.
That's why it could languish and be 5 years. But once you get the money and you have a really good team and you've got a good owner and leadership and all, then I hope you get that momentum of a good team in sync, getting something done in a really good order. And that can be done effectively. So timelines, there's a lot of unknown with that, but there is, so let's say, what's the timeline towards just this RFP piece? And from RFP to end of concept, we'll call it concept design, which is both analysis and synthesis, something visual to sell of what the vision is. What does that look like in terms of timing? So when would the RFP be produced? How long does that take to then go out to the receiving end to be interviewed? Are you bringing people here to come and meet them? And then how and who makes the selection? They get an okay. Then you have a period of concept design. That's how fast, how much money do you have? How many trips are they taking? There's,
Right. All that has to
and
work
how
out,
many
right.
times are they coming, and what are they
Right.
producing, and how is it reviewed, and then how is it finalized? And that's a time frame. Aggressive, you can do it really aggressive, you can do it sort of aggressive, how much do you guys want to chew on the first version that they did? And those
Right.
are just process pieces that say sometime by the fall, maybe, I don't know, you'll have the sellable, you'll have this wonderful vision that I agree is like very far along. a lot of technical things that can be, what has to be done, what could be done, all synthesized into a document, a piece that is what then has to go and get approved to then go out in the world to sell.
Mhm.
And there's a timeline there that we can, that needs to be designed, I guess, is my point.
So if we want to put just initial numbers on it, what are your thoughts about how long the initial analysis will take to prepare an RFP? This is not a detailed analysis, but whatever initial analysis, if we need
Zero,
zero.
Yeah.
zero,
Okay, so we're ready to,
absolutely
To
zero.
make an RF, to write the RFP.
Nothing needs done.
Yeah.
okay, so what's the, so this is, let's call it done.
Why do you say zero?
Check.
So RFP release.
Why do I say zero? Because this is before the RFP. We can write the RFP now. There's nothing stopping us
Yeah,
from
that's
writing the
right.
RFP. But to me, that would be the best use of our time, our
Mm.
little bit of remaining time, is we had a bunch of good ideas these last couple of days. Let's think about exactly which ones we want to pursue and include in the
Right.
RFP. That's not new analysis. That's just ideas about what do we want. I feel like I've learned a lot over the last 2 days about things we should be thinking about that should be in the RFP. That's all we need. There's no
Okay,
analysis
I
in
agree with
those.
you. Okay.
None.
And just to quickly follow up on Kevin's suggestion, like, so in that case, when can we roughly, you think, we'll get the RFP ready?
2-3 weeks.
So let's say March
I mean,
1st.
it depends,
So that's March
But
first.
I'm just saying, I mean, again, you got socially, you got people who are like, they're not bought in. They
They're not
invite them for
going
a
to do
day
a
and they
joke.
show up for a couple hours, and yet there's some threads. So if you say, I want it now, I want it all, I want it fast, then they're just like, we're,
What I
How
heard
about
from
an
Joe
RFP?
last night is he's waiting for an RFP.
Right.
That's what he needs is an RFP.
he's waiting to be told that they can do it. But that he would engage with an RFP to develop the RFP.
I felt that last night he basically told us what I need from you is an
That
RFP.
yes, that he would work with us to
But
develop.
that's
the
what
RFP.
he needs from us is an RFP,
Right.
that's what he wants.
Right.
He wants to.
They
be
will
able to
do
draft
nothing,
it.
they will do
Yes.
nothing
He
over
doesn't
there.
want you to give it to him. He wants to work on it with you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
no, what I heard is he wants it.
Chris
No,
is saying he wants to work on it.
FPC develops the RFP.
Okay.
FPC.
I mean, this is
manages the
something, a
contract.
Yeah, but-
follow-up meeting with Joe can.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any barrier between, except for work. But I don't think there's any external studies or analysis.
Yeah, no, I agree
think-
with you. I agree with you. on
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So I just, one thing that's not up there to me is the whole, and the first at taking a 25-year-old high-performance building and moving on from there to whatever we think we want it to be. I think that's a big deal. And if we don't at least say that, then I think we're missing the boat. I just see it as missing, but I think we ought to make it a very important chunk. David.
We're looking, sorry, I'm a latecomer here, so I probably missed a whole lot of important stuff that's already been said. But my experience, for what it's worth, is that college administrators are not paid to be bold. They're herd followers. I don't mean that critically, I just mean that's a sociological analysis. They go where the other folks go. Break them out of the herd path. They're pretty hard to push generally. The way they respond is to peer pressure and outside pressure. One good op-ed in the New York Times or a piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education. We got a piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education early on this project, and it changed a whole lot of things. And so we also arranged a board meeting with 5 famous people: George Woodwell, David Meadows, I forgot Bill Newell, people whose opinions matter. And so on this project, if you want to accelerate, a lot of acceleration simply depends on the hard facts of how you do it. And schedule is given the same. But I would propose finding a small group of people whose opinions matter nationally. Get them on our side, have them put pressure on the administration. They are herd followers. And so they'll go where they're kind of told this is a new trend, this is a new thing, this you got to do it. So, and that's a fairly easy thing to do. Around the room here, we could put together a list of 20 people. You all know somewhere in your Rolodex term in the dates. But I still have flip phone. But that group of people would be easy to motivate. It's an exciting project. Let them get in on the excitement, and their role is to put this in the national press, cocktail party conversations across the country, wherever they go. And enough said on that. That if you want to accelerate, your accelerator is not going to be within the organization. There are all kinds of stumbling. So the first thing that colleges and universities will give you the 19 reasons why this can't be done. Or should be done at the pace it needs to be done. The fact of the matter is the world's on fire and we need a sense of urgency across the board. We're at 1.63. You know, and that's the data from last year.
You know.
And here we are. And what do? You want business as normal. This is a way, and for the institution, it's a way to jar the institution out of its lethargy and out of its fear. On 1.0, we were about 4.5 years from approval to complete building, or as it was, John did in 2000. But if you want to go fast, you got to get outside it. And it's easy to do. There are hundreds of people out there, opinions matter, that would love to help this go fast. It's in your interest, an exciting thing to do. That's it.
Josette, did you want?
Yes, I just wanted to let you all know that like 40 minutes ago, we were supposed to start developing priority items to include in the program statement for fundraising. So I just wanted to.
Time check.
Yeah.
Kevin, Lindsay.
Who's fellows here?
So I wanted to pick up on something Chris said early on was, and then also what Lindsay touched on is in a way, like where can we provide strategic resources to help smooth things along? So if it's a temporary hire to have some additional staff over there to shepherd this early phase, that sounds interesting. If that morphed into somebody like Clark Brockman is somebody we know or that could facilitate and give input on this broader thing, it's a front end investment on a set of intelligence that can really move things along.
And I think it would salve some of the initial chafing that I'm hearing and seeing. I mean, again, there's enough. Joe came back. I mean, there's enough.
Yeah.
But and then if we can say, hey, all right, we would like to use a percentage of it to help facilitate this initial phase, and it's a little bite, but David is right. That's how we got where we are. It's the outside pressure coming in.
What if that cost, because go as fast as you can. It's a 3-year project. It's miraculously fast. We did the concept, money got raised, and we moved out. What if that facilities part-time person were there for 3 years? They're hired to just shepherd this thing. And oh, by the way, what they're learning on this is what they're for the next renovation on campus, or that, you know, you're building internal robust capacity to deal with the thing that we have to deal with. Our buildings fall apart. We need to fix them intelligently. We have expertise within the facilities group to start to do this. We're building the capacity. So maybe
that's a desire within. I'm telling you, there's a desire within FPC specifically to do that, but we want to build it up. It's just we've inherited such a legacy of disinvestment on campus.
But add that
struggling to get out of it.
Add that to the cost of the project. That's what you. That becomes from this side. Say, okay, then we will help there. There
is one other point. The donor community here is fairly fickle. One of the things this project would tell them is we take care of your assets. You give money here, you got a name in a building, we take care of it. We'll allow it to grow. And so it's not one and done. And that's an important thing to tell donors. You know, we want your money, appreciate it, but this will grow in importance and we will take care of the asset you created. There are any number of donors that give money for buildings that come back 10 years later and they're shabby, poorly maintained and all that. That's an important thing for you donor people.
Do we add landscape to the analysis?
Yeah, I was gonna add, somewhere I think you need, sort of flood adaptation. There's not much about water on that list. I think something about like exterior water and interior water, especially if living building challenges. Yeah, something. Were you done, Karen?
Oh, yeah. No, I was just gonna say, an add maybe on the innovative side is, there's so much talk about interpretive expertise to be part of the mix, and I think that's critical.
Yep. I want to make a meta point, but I don't mean to keep slowing things down. I think one of the reasons I'm sort of fixated on the process point and the idea of hiring somebody like a Clark Brockman or something along those lines is that I'm gonna just speak for like Kevin and Russ here and say like, we aren't necessarily just gonna keep showing up every month just to sort of help you figure out what this is. We can find some famous people for you. We can review your RFP bids with you. We can refer people to you to suggest that they bid for it. We can come back and review the analysis once it's done. But right now, we don't really know what our role is in this, and it's not very clear. And so part of, I think, what I'm trying to do is give you enough that you can get the people you're gonna need to sort this out, because we don't really have roles. And so I think somebody like a Clark could basically help think through some of the things that I'm just foreseeing. I'm not gonna have time to help you figure out. But you also don't really want to use my expertise for this kind of stuff. You would definitely just want me to help you get a connection to Naomi.
Because you won't be there for the long haul. You need somebody who's strapped on and ready to stay with it.
And it's not just because our time is limited, it's because we're just like, we're three people who are kind of useful for some things and not for other
Yeah, no,
things.
totally.
So I think that's part of it. It's like, I want to make sure that we've got enough process suggestions here that you can really run with it and know what happens next.
Well, I would say that, that yesterday in particular was super useful for beginning to flesh out some of the additional areas that we need to think about and might need to have some expertise in and might need to build into the RFP so that we make sure that we have that expertise, that kind of analysis going. So I think I would just start by saying, you've been incredibly useful so far. The discussion yesterday was hugely valuable, and I think everyone sees that. I don't know who this, when you keep referring to this person, Clark, I have no idea what they did, or, you refer to them as some internal dialogue that you've got an idea of what this person's gonna do. I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue what this person will do. I would like some sort of explanation of what you, beyond the name of the person, what you think they could do. But my sense is that we're still where we were, and it's not a bad place, in saying we're going to take the existing vision and we're going to flesh it out with these ideas, and we're probably going to go into parallel tracks where David Orr, with the help of friends like you, is going to try to build that external excitement about this thing, to create the kind of pressure that David's talking about, so that administrators within Oberlin College are saying, yeah, this seems like something the world wants to see happen, and that's pretty straight up. I still am a little bit ambiguous about, like, if there's a person who's coming in and helping, where does that fit into the RFP process? My sense is the RFP's before that. So I can't see us hiring someone before we have the definition. And so I don't know if you guys would do that. But I also think we need to understand, like, the degree to which we want this to be part of the college. And I think there's a lot of ways we want it to be part of the rest of the college, especially in terms of narrative, because I do think the right narrative for this building is the interpretive center for everything that's happened since this building. I think that's the right narrative. I think that's the selling narrative, as opposed to it's the environmental studies program Environmental Studies and Sciences program expanding their little building here. I don't think that sells. I don't think it's the right story. It's totally the wrong story at this point. So it integrates with the college that way. Where I worry is when we start talking about, well, we can hire someone who can do a lot of other things for the institution, because this is one of my problems with like a suggestion that was made earlier by Rebecca Skilling and others people is we'll hire one architect who'll do 5 buildings and the AJLC will be one of those buildings, because I think that's going to seriously slow us down if we're saying the AJLC is going to be part of not a larger narrative. It needs to be part of the larger narrative, but it's going to be part of a set of buildings that get done, because then you mix up a lot of things. And yeah, sure, there could be some synergy in saying, yeah, we're learning lessons here that we're going to apply elsewhere. But I think as soon as you start mixing it, fundraising becomes super difficult, because what are you fundraising for, the AJLC or the 5 buildings that are part of this mix? I think it just really does not work to say we're hiring someone who's going to do the AJLC and they've got a bunch of other roles in the facility. I just think that's a no-go for fundraising. It's a no-go for making any sort of rapid progress. So just realistically, I think we need to think about this as something that incorporates the narrative of the entire institution, but is an isolated project. And the money is being raised for this project. The design is being done for this project, and it's not like we got a bunch of other stuff going on campus with this one, because I just think it becomes an impossible project.
David, and then I'll
A couple of comments here. One is, and this goes back to the budget. Don't make it cheap. You know, we could have, AGLC 1.0 could have been 2 double wide trailers, but you couldn't find donors that wanted their name like the Bob Smith double wide trailer of environmental studies. It doesn't work. The second thing is, in your RFP, I mean, you talked about that there been mention of other departments. Build some money in, spread the wealth, and put together we didn't do this on 1.0, but we should have. Get other people selected and targeted who can play a role in fleshing this out. You build a constituency in the faculty, you've already got the students. Third, and this is a question. John, what are you doing for the next 3 years?
I've got a lot of work to do. It's not this.
If the college bought you out, it puts you in the role of manager, on-site manager. You're a good manager. You're a great manager. This is not an offer. I mean,
I don't know, David. I'm willing
Okay,
to
well,
put
think
I'm
about
willing to put some stuff into this. But,
well, think
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Because it would save a lot of time bringing somebody else up to speed. You're already there. And you've already got the credibility here on campus. And all they have to do is buy you out. Then that could be part of the RFP. We'll give you a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I had a quick,
quick
just to
way.
follow up on how people the priorities of different people. So I can see where when Rebecca said that, oh, let's bundle it together with 4 other buildings. Obviously, we don't want to go there, but I do understand.
Oh, I
where
totally
they're-
understand why.
No,
you
but
do
I'm
that.
just articulating it, is that everyone we interact with are going to first look at this from their vantage point. That's the
Of course.
reality. They're going to look at it from the vantage point of their interest, the work they're doing, and what's in it for me kind of thing. What's in it for so that's the reality. We have to overcome that. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with them, but we have to understand where they're coming from and then engage with them in a way that articulates where we want to go and how they can be part of it and how they can benefit from it, like some buy-in, incorporate certain things that those other peoples have to gain from this project.
So, well, I've got Kevin actually and Lindsay, right? Sorry, I had to
Yeah,
take a
go
bio break, so.
Yeah.
No, it's all right.
We lost everything while you were gone.
Yeah.
It just collapsed.
So I'm just responding somewhat to John, because I'm not quite clear about the specific concern in terms of like keeping it focused. I think from running a project like this from experience, it seems like there's a partnership between the facilities side and the person who potentially is in a distracted role because they're running a number of projects, and that just might be the nature of the beast. And there's somebody in your position or somebody on the faculty, and your unique experience in knowing so much about this building and really trimming the sails for 15 years, 20 years, whatever that is. As the project is going, there's this pairing of those two capabilities or levels of attention to the project that you're trying to operate not just as a renovation, but at the highest levels of what a green performance might be. And there's just both entities need to have had exposure to the experience to ensure that it's as effective as possible. So that's just, I don't know exactly what the missing pieces to that are. Is it your time? Is it that person's time and focus? Is there, we say Clark Brockman as a kind of consultant to how you all.
Is Clark Brockman?
Okay, sorry. We'll explain in a second, but somebody that has the intelligence to be a resource to that pairing that helps get things through. It could be that that's why like a dedicated person at facilities that only worked on this and a dedicated person that could only work on this, that might be it. But if you don't have that, you need something that makes that the intelligence needed from the owner's side of the table to get the project done effectively, knowing all the different things internally of keeping a high-powered team going and running interference with the administration and all of that to smooth things. That's kind of what I'm just trying to focus on. Clark is an architect in Portland, worked with Sarah Architects, and really became great expertise across a wide range of sustainability projects, probably more on the project management and implementation of sustainability strategies than design. But I overlapped with Clark on projects as we were working with Google to design their global design guidelines. And so we were on the owner side of the table trying to help Google figure out how to be a good owner and how to take their ambitions and make them evident to the best designers in the world to do something effectively. So he has that exposure, and then any number, on project implementation execution, he's been there, done that, and is very effective. And he's a really good guy. He's like the right kind of person to bring in the room. I don't know how else to describe it.
Question for Lindsay: how many roughly ballpark square feet, millions of square feet of buildings are coming in at this zone? If this project is developed, what's your wild scales?
Coming into this zone? Oh, I mean, well, I could give you the big number, which is,
Give me the big one.
it's like 3-4 billion square feet.
Okay. That is the part of the building environment. Buildings are 40% carbon. That's the part of it that's the leading edge of the spear. This is important in that project. We've got to up the performance level of all that building stock, and all the building stock is influenced by that building stock.
Right.
So this is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
And I would be, John, I don't disagree with you a lot. I do on this. I think this ought to be singled out as a premier project instead of being an item on a list, but the lead item on the list that informs everything else on the list. And that's different. It's
What should be?
this building, 2.0. So it's not just another, oh my God, we got Mrs. Roof leaks and the library needs, this.
Well, that's a total agreement with me. Yeah, no, that's my problem is I don't want them to lump it together.
Okay, I would agree with you. I think it ought to be singled out, and the way to do that is going to be put an outside spotlight on this project. And for all the reasons, this is big numbers. And it's a kind of change. It's small by volume, large by effect, like salt in the stew. It just changes the flavor of the whole building conversation. But I think bounce it up, speed it up as fast as it can be done really, really well. And don't make it cheap.
I think Lindsay's still.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm just noodling on all this, and I think thinking about how 25 years ago, you had a very different recipe for success for this building. There's a couple of things that you had then that you don't have now, and then some things that you have now that you didn't have then. But I think what I'm trying to do is make sure that, like, just to take that metaphor a little further, you had some really incredible ingredients 25 years ago that you don't have now. How are you still gonna make this soup taste good without those two ingredients? You're gonna have to add a couple of new things in. So last time you had David making this his thing and integrating it into the curriculum himself, being the pitch man himself, committing to follow through on it himself, writing about it publicly himself. That was a thing you had. I
He
am
also
hearing.
contracted with Signano Brothers in Newark, New Jersey.
Himself.
They're in the personnel business.
There you go, yeah. So,
Concrete waste
so you don't have that now. You might have him as a tip of the spear type of fundraiser, but you don't have that thing. That was a real asset. The other thing that you don't have this time around is that last time the bar was low in terms of what it meant to be a building. That was really challenging the industry, because the green building industry just like hadn't really come anywhere now. And so I think part of what I'm saying with mentioning the Harvards and the Stanfords of the world is that now the bar is really high for getting anyone's attention on what makes an
Margins are
iconic
smaller.
project. Yeah, so if you're gonna get the external attention and the well-known people, you have to be doing something that no one's talking about, or you have to be able to talk about why it's better than any of those other projects in a really succinct way. So Clark is my suggestion about how to kind of, it doesn't have to be Clark, but like Clark is a particularly unique person in the
Is that
world.
Clark Kent? Or is that-
Yeah, right.
He's my suggestion of a way to augment your lack of a David that can do all of the things and sort of figure out who needs to talk to whom and what the process is. He's a process person and he's worked on the owner's side a lot. So maybe it's not Clark, but I just want to say, like, you may find that you guys are busy doing your day jobs
Right.
and you can't have the mental space to think through how to get this to unfold in the right way. I don't want you to end up 2 years from now being like, whoops, we forgot to make it educational and the students had nothing to do with it. Or like, whoops, we forgot to, I don't know, we never told a big enough story or something. Like, there's a lot of things you just may not have time for that hiring somebody like him would help with. And I think we could get crafty about how to put it into the RFP in a way that, like, a big engineering firm could sub to him so that he could help as like an owner's consultant or something on process. It'd be okay. We could figure it out.
He'd be working, I mean, I think of him as being like some version of owner's rep, like he's directly working
Yes.
for the owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
and
he's not managing the overall, but like, I heard you introduce his name, and we were talking about sort of change management.
Change
Yeah.
management, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't have to
With
be that. That's
specifics
just my
to this
idea, but I
industry.
am
Yeah.
pointing out that there's a gap.
I won't say too much, but I will say this. For this project, John is an incredible asset. If it's a relay race, he ran the second lap as well as it could be run. And that is an incredible asset. This building matters out there because of the technical detail that John and a few of you others put into it. It's not like any other building on the campus. I don't think it's like any other building that I know in the US. So that's an incredible asset. So you're starting off with a level of technical competence here and virtuosity that is really unparalleled. And you can build on that. So
I mean, I'm sold on the pitch.
I can't, yeah, I'm definitely not committing to that, but I'm committing to, you know, I mean, obviously I wouldn't have, you know, put the energy into, you know, trying to corral people for this if I hadn't thought that this was a particular moment. This is part of my concern with timing, actually, is that, you know, and I felt like it was well encapsulated in what Kevin said the other day about momentum. I just feel like there's a moment right now. There is a moment and we need to act quickly on this moment. Now, whether the full playing out takes, you know, several years is fine, but it's a moment of convergence between 25th anniversary, you know, SIP project and all of the synergy with that, new majors and all of the synergy with that. And, you know,
Carbon neutrality.
the carbon neutral, all of that is like this moment in time. And if we envision a process now that takes 6 years to roll out, we don't have the momentum. So there needs to be relatively quick action in moving forward. Now, things take a while to unroll, but thinking of a narrative that maybe it's a sequence narrative. Maybe it's not everything at once. Maybe it's like, because we all recognize educational value of this building is not what it needs to be. And for SIP, that's a project that we want to get PR ASAP.
Right.
And if this is going to be the interpretive center, maybe that's an earlier piece of it, so there's a lot of complexity to this. I definitely can't own this project because I'm still teaching half-time here and I've got a business I'm ramping up. It's got 8 people working for it. I'm not going to drop that right now. I can't do that.
We wouldn't be here, however, if it weren't for you.
No,
I
that's
tried to
fine.
say that yesterday. Well, but
thank you for the credit. That's
Okay,
great.
but-
I'm just saying bandwidth wise, moving
Well,
forward.
maybe
I'm
we have-
committed to this.
anyway, we
But
got.
I think thinking about like project management of this, I think is a critical question. And I just want to say, Lindsay, I've disagreed with you on a few things today. Your analysis of our differences, 100% with you. That was like so right on in terms of what's different about now. I still think, honest to God, pointing it back at David, there's one, and I said this before you were here, and I'll say it with you here.
Don't point that.
There's one person who can, there's one person in this room, I think, who can do a whole host of external movement, and that's David on this. Obviously, he doesn't have the bandwidth he had before in terms of his other commitments and, a lot of things going on in his life too. But I think there's no way this project goes anywhere without David and his Rolodex, if we're going to go back to that analogy, but that's his Rolodex.
Nice way to say we're doomed.
No, I'm serious. There's just nothing there. You were the glue. I think you're the glue for the next step too. I think there's no way we get where we need to go without David's heavy involvement. And I think on the facility side, we do have, so you talked about our deficits now, which are all totally valid. Our advantages are we're the icon of the goddamn green building movement, and these other buildings are going to need to go through there. So there's a very clear story about why this is once again important. I don't think it's quite as sexy as Time Zero. I'll grant you that. But I still think it's a narrative that is important. We have this guy who at least is a bridge, into the administration that we never had in phase 1. Who will tell you, as he said to this group, he came here in part because of this building, because of what he saw here. He wants to do the right thing. He's constrained because he's a year into this position. He doesn't, he's got bosses who are not as on board as he is, so he's limited. But you guys never had that in phase 1. You never had a Chris Norman who wanted to make this thing happen. I'm not saying you have the limited power that you have, but we have someone who's on board, so we have some advantages as well. I still think that this project, because it's such an icon, and I think it isn't everyone in the fund world. I mean, there's no one else in the Midwest. You can talk about cool things going on the coasts. There's an angle to this being, something happened in the middle of the damn country, that I think is actually part of the sale,
I agree. I think about the Midwest Climate Collaborative, and there's a whole thinking of.
We're the little engine. We're a little school. We're a little engine, and let's not forget we've got the whole community which has been transformed as a result of the AJLC.
Right.
We've got the story of the whole city of Oberlin, and you've got the story of the campus. There's a lot of selling features that weren't. I mean, because the story now is this little building changed the goddamn world, and now we're going to do more stuff to make it change the world even more. It's a compelling story. It's not nothing.
Russ?
There may be something else going on at this particular moment in time that's also worth capitalizing on. And I'm going to have to refer to Walt and David. 1980, when I was still in elementary school, Ronald Reagan was elected and contributions, so I'm told, to NRDC, environmental defense, Sierra Club and so forth soared. People saying, oh my God, we've got to do something. That we may be at the beginning of that happening
I
again.
totally
But
agree.
it's right now.
That's exactly right. It is today. It may have been yesterday.
Mhm.
It's probably not 6 months from now.
I'm totally in agreement with that. I think there is a moment that the article in the Chronicle probably should be in their hands right now, so that we can get that all going. I think that may open up some funding streams, people saying, I want to do something about this. This is awful. I leave that out there.
Well, it's the LA fires, I mean, just put an exclamation mark on it, the LA fires gives access to not only an iconic event, the world's on fire. LA is one of the most famous, the most famous communication city in the world.
Yeah.
Burned. And we have 3 or 4 Oberlin alums in that LA elite that I think could be brought into this. But I couldn't agree more. I guess it's a really good point. It is a time.
Is the time, and I think probably keep pushing on you. I tried this yesterday saying, you did get us here. The stuff you put together is great. I'm also going to throw something out that some people are probably going to throw things at me. At one point, I loved it. There was an Oberlin campaign, an effort, and we hired a consultant. I thought they did fantastic work. What they came up with was, we are Oberlin, fearless. And it,
50
but
grand they spent on that.
they did, and it was great. And because what came before it, and so, because you keep saying, so remember what the phrase we've used for years, think one person can change the world. We do.
So do we.
So do we. Okay, you think one person can change the world, so do we. We are Oberlin, fearless. If you put those two things together, the fearless thing is what makes us do what we do. It's not that we're not afraid. It's that we're willing to put ourselves out there. That's what that whole thing was about. I participated in the development of that thing but the way it got rolled out and the way it got misinterpreted by so many people was, wait a minute, I'm here, I'm a first-year student, I'm afraid, I'm not fearless. Well, that wasn't the point of the whole thing. The whole point of the thing was what we've tried to pick up on here. We're out there, we're out front, we're doing something different, and we're not afraid to do that. So you may not want to use that phrase, but that's what this is about. And it still is. I mean, the number of times the pieces of the phrase, think one person can change the world, has been said in this gathering here. It keeps coming up because we're Oberlin, and that's what we do. So I think that it means go ahead, and I really can't argue with David's idea about okay, so you're going to teach for a while, but we've really got to have a focus. If we have to hire Clark, is that his name? Then we hire Clark. But
Get him on the phone.
but I think, and we've got to do it now. I think the point.
Call Clark.
Yeah.
I actually have it on the board now.
But I think Russ is right. The time is now, and it's not going to be forever.
Yeah.
And I think there is a big deal. I interact with not millions, but a lot of Oberlin alumni, and where we are right now with what you just talked about, it's like, oh my God, what the hell are we going to do?
There's only one place hope exists right now, and it's at a local level, and we can sell that right now.
Right.
There's no hope at the national level, and we've done something big here with SIP. I just feel like
Yes.
tying in with the larger institution to me is like absolutely critical. This is about this building's relationship now. It's not about this building as an example. It's about this building's relationship.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something about Lindsay and you guys who are designers and architects. It isn't just Oberlin, the Fearless campaign, all that kind of stuff, which I found amusing because the administration is in, but the whole design profession needs to step up. And we were talking about AIA and USGBC and so forth. There's apparently, I gathered, a lethargy at the leadership level. We need something that picks up the game for the designers. A lot rests on people designing a different world. I mean, it's basically everything we built in the last 300 years needs to be redesigned in a lot of ways. And so the design professions here need to be upgraded. This project helps get them pushed in that direction. I mean, we need the word is leadership. It's got a little bit trite, but there needs to be some leadership on this. And leaders have to do what they do, and this room is full of them. The design professions need to be summoned to a higher level of performance and commitment. And I think this can have that effect.
We're gonna run down the clock here.
We
And
are.
I just want to say that I want to make sure, because I feel like yesterday was super productive in getting a bunch of these ideas out. I feel like what Rumi's done up here in terms of sort of fleshing out the different things. I want to make sure we don't leave any ideas off the table that we think should be in the RFP in terms of areas that you guys as people within the industry really understand. What did we not talked about that could be that we need to analyze or that could be innovative? Because I feel like we had some great ideas yesterday, and I'm not, in this field right now, so I want any ideas we didn't have that you guys think need to be there, so that we capture those and can get them in the RFP.
And I think generally what we are looking for are things that won't fit into any of these, because
They may or may not, yeah.
Yeah, if there's something that doesn't fit into any of these, we need to identify those.
Lindsay.
I mean, I'm just looking at my list and I really did try to capture the things I thought needed to be addressed, and I think you've got it on that list for now, at least at a high level, and I think it'll be easy to like mark up a Word doc to add in specifics under each of these
Right.
categories.
Right.
When we're not in the room. And so I'll say from my perspective anyway, like, I think this would make a perfectly good beginning of a document that I'm happy to like make some suggestions and edits to based on what I heard that I thought was compelling yesterday. I do want to keep on this point though, about like how we're going to make this happen, because I guess maybe one way I'll put it is, this to me seems like a known, and we're gonna do it, and we have money to do it, and it's gonna be one of the paths forward. It's gonna be one of the parallel things that we're doing to make this building come up, to do the project. This part about accelerating, selecting well-known people, stimulating national conversation, getting prominent press coverage, all of that stuff that David is saying, like, I think I tend to agree also that like, you can't ask for a small amount of money and you can't make this sound small. You can't make it sound easy. You can't make it sound incremental. It has to sound like a big thing that we're going to do. Can it sound like it's going to be quick? Potentially. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can make it sound like, you use the David rhetoric of like, the world is on fire. We got to do this now. So sometimes it'll work. There's a lot of people who make pitches, saying the world is on fire, we got to do this now. And so there's unfortunately a little bit of, what do you call it, desensitization that's happened on that point out there, but I think we should still do it. We don't have action items on a lot of that stuff yet. And I just want to say that we could just go forward with knowing that we're going to take this next step of doing the analysis and spending the money that's been raised. But I don't think we're clear yet as to what the action items are on the fundraising side, or on the sort of acceleration side, or on this broader thing. Like, what's literally going to happen next? And maybe that gets to this point about timeline that we started to write out. There's the timeline of obviously spending the money that we raised, but less clear on what we do next on the other fronts.
Lindsay, or do you have national leadership on the list? I didn't see it up there, but did you talk about that?
Do we talk about, like, we
National
talk as a
leadership,
movement?
in other words, starting to put together a network of organizations like, Little Village, Gallons could be
Right.
core to this. And maybe convening a national gathering here. bring
That would be, yeah,
If that kinda came up earlier.
we don't convene, and I mean, I think,
Could you collaborate in convening? We can convene.
yeah, exactly, right, like, so we could, I think there's interest in having people get together and talk about movement strategy. There's a lack of money for people to travel and some things like that that have made it never really come together, but I think there's more interest than there used to be. Unfortunately, at the beginning, 20 years ago, there was a lot more egos that would butt heads, who didn't want to collaborate, and we've gotten past that in the past few years. So yes, and also, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I think that people do think of this building when they think of some of the origin stories, but they think of some other buildings as well. So I wouldn't go too heavy on assuming that people think that this building is the one. Like, I mean, and I like, I know I don't have to like tiptoe around egos here, but like, I think it's one of the handful for sure. So people would resonate with that and would probably be willing to come and hang out here if they could somehow get their travel covered.
The word catalyst should be up there, that we catalyze the larger national dialogue in both communities.
Yeah.
Being catalyzed and that can start the conversation
Yes.
going. Just get people together and talk. And having those events well reported and,
And I
and
think,
we've got a couple of OBs that write op-eds periodically, very regularly for the New York Times. The land is the national press, so if you're getting this thing out there, podcasts, and all that. So I think catalysts, trying to catalyze a larger debate, which makes it a whole hell of a lot easier to raise money for this specific part of that.
yeah, it does. And I think that, I do think that the movement needs that kind of time and attention and strategic work right now. And I think that it could happen here and that would help you all to leverage this particular building. I think that how to say this quickly, it's not at a point of strength right now, right? So everybody's looking for money. I mean, I think, Russ, you're right. Like we are all hoping that there's going to be a wave of support that comes to support our work. But like literally yesterday, I got an email from someone who was laid off because her nonprofit had to contract because the funding was pulled back by the Gates Foundation. So like right now what we're seeing is contraction, not willingness of folks to step up and say, we want to put money to make sure that this work continues. So we don't have time to get into everything that the movement is going through right now. I'll just say, yes, we could do a convening, but if we really want to talk about like movement strategy, that's probably a separate conversation about what the movement needs right now, where it is, who the main players are, who needs to be there. And I think that kind of goes a little bit something I'm still noodling over for this project, which is like, I think you have a really strong pitch to make about this campus and about Ohio and about Oberlin as a city, and how this building kind of ripples out to that. Like, that's super clear to me right now. It's, once you start to make it into an icon of the green building movement and try to help the movement as a whole, like it is, I'm still kind of trying to figure out what the right angle is to make that helpful to the movement, or to feel relevant, because like, yeah.
Is that true?
So-
Can I just ask a quick question of other folks? Do you feel like other green buildings have been catalytic in the way that we described this one as? Have they changed the surrounding community or the institutions in which they participate? I'm just wondering the extent to which that's a particularity of this project, or if that's true of the Bullitt Center, Chesapeake Bay, these other early iconographic examples. I just don't have a clue whether they rippled out the way this one. There's a clear narrative of how this one did.
I think some of them do. Some of them do in very literal ways. They get involved in things like passing legislation to change the laws around what you can build and what you can't build to allow more buildings to be built that way. Or they get used as like case studies for an iconic piece of legislation like Local Law 97 in New York City, like Empire State Building was used as that for sure. So sometimes, yeah, that happens. But RMI's work, which I think Amory mentioned yesterday.
Sometimes there were, the Bullitt Center, Dennis Hayes came
Yeah.
here first before he did the Bullitt Center.
Yeah, there you go.
And the Croon Center deans came down here before they did the Croon Center at Yale. So we had
Yeah.
Princeton sent trustees out here to see this before they were doing the green building on Princeton campus. So I think that we were just early enough.
Yeah.
That those ideas happened.
Yeah.
I think what John is saying though is really important. Most of those buildings kind of stopped at that point. Some great buildings, they curated what they had built, but they didn't see themselves as a role often, at least I'm not aware of it, as extending their dialogue out into other fields, and certainly not into, like, we challenge the educational pedagogy more than any other similar building.
Yeah.
They work within the existing establishment. Okay, this building challenged a good bit of what we took to be mainstream paradigm.
Yeah, there were two things I wanted to say. One is to remind us back to what Kevin said quite a while ago about, and I'm a little concerned about trying to worry too much about how much we're going to put in here and detail, and not enough about getting an RFP done that there's enough to hang things on. We don't have to have all the detail today. And then, secondly, I think the story is unique. There have been other green buildings built, they've been big, they've been different, et cetera. But the fact that they can't then go out and end up at the SIP. There isn't in this community and carbon neutral, the whole community, et cetera. So I think that's a unique piece of this story that we are really make hay with. Now, then I have Nick, Kevin, and Rumi.
I just had a quick clarifying question. I see we've got the lab up here. David, you were saying yesterday in terms of naming rights, it sort of sounded like you envisioned the lab as like a project separate from AJLC 2.0. And I just wanted to clarify if we're thinking about that still under this scope or as something different.
Oh, Nicholas, good question. I don't think I was very clear about that. Kevin and I walked out on the west side of the building after during the break. And there's actually probably enough space to build a lab, just, either part of the building or squeezed right in there. And leave the lab in place, because John's point of leave the lab there so you have facilities for somebody coming in right now. I think the Adam Joseph Lewis Center ought to be the primary name, but if you have the Adam Joseph Lewis Center, or put something like the Carolyn Smith Lab at the Adam Joseph Lewis Center, I mean, combine the names so that you give this, the station doesn't take away from Adam's initial contribution. But my comment yesterday was, and keeping John's point in mind, and keep the continuity for lab facility here on site, there's enough space here probably to work with if you had money to build something. You're not talking about building a large facility. And the other comment, this goes past your question, that goes to I think that we ought to be thinking 25 years out also. What will this discipline, whatever you want to call it, grow into? And our comments yesterday, I think Lindsay had this exactly right. I think we got to think about becoming, instead of an environmental studies program that deals with problems, the Environmental or Ecological Design Institute of some sort that designs problems out. And I think the future is going to be some kind of combination of disciplines or skills that moves in that direction. But think 25 years, what will people in this room or some similar room be thinking in response to what will then be widely recognized as a global conflagration? There's not even the most even Amory could not optimistically say what will be here in 25 years. Optimism is on a further horizon. And so what do we do in the meantime? What's the bridge to that further horizon? So what's that mean here? As we think about what might be done in 25 or need to be done in 25 years. Maybe that's a lot more than you asked for. I'm out of my depth, so somebody say something quick.
So I've got Kevin, Rumi, and Lindsay, and I just, my Josette thing just kicked in. It's now 11, and I would like us to leave here with some concrete actions to utilize what's on that board and how and who that's gonna happen. So Kevin.
So just some of the imagery, like on the discussions about ways to address some of the problems or ways of thinking about how to solve, getting the community in here, getting students to discover this place and all. And even Bill Browning talking about the sort of the movement through places. You go into the low portion to come to this, to understanding. I had an image of this building that's part of what it wants to do is be a portal to the future. And it wants to do that when the bus drives by and somebody wants to come in and look at what the future might be, a little fractal, what they might do to their home, to the industry saying, what does the future look like? So that's an image that deals with space and time, and the physicality, but also like a time frame. We're saying that the future it's an urgency now. So you really make that critical. Along with that, I think we could say that the design process starts right now, or has started. And that the industry, one thing that unfortunately Michelle Amp wasn't here, but in her role in the green building movement is wonderfully about transparency. And she's trying to coax architects and firms to be transparent about how they're doing. Report how you're doing. Don't be afraid to tell warts and all that what you're doing. I think there's the potential for this being like, be transparent about the process. Let people learn in real time about every step of the way, because people need to be replicating this in real time. So find a way in this portal or the online portal, but communicate, be very open, because often things aren't open in the way that things are happening. So those are 2 points. I'll be my David or 1, 2, 3. My third point is I think that's a wonderful list, both lists. I think if I were on the receiving end of the RFP, I wouldn't want to see it as a checklist of these are the things I need to do. It's like, those are great. It shows the scope of ambition. It's all about the analysis and synthesis, even in short order. They should add much more than we could ever imagine, because they got it, they got inspired by it, and they know of other things that need to be on the list. So it's a great list, and it's a starting off point. It's not a finish the box.
Rumi.
Yes, so I'll do my David R of 1, 2, 3.
And one last thing.
So 2 comments and a question. So the first comment, following up on Nick's comment, I think that was a very good observation. The way I'm looking at the lab and its extension thing is that this is the RFP stage. So we want whoever is working on this to come up to know that this is a need. This is something that we need, and come up with different ways we can accomplish it. So one way would be to have an extension of this. Another idea was to build another building and have a meadow. So give them the idea that this is important. We need this. Tell us how we can do it in the most interesting way. The second one is on the innovation side. We do have that community engagement, the interpretive learning center part, and one of the things I was talking about yesterday was about that, having the space as a place of, I use the word pop-up, but I think what I mean is a little bit more permanent, longer term, like as a place where different types of knowledge can be shared, so that it makes it accessible and welcoming to different groups of people, right? And I do think that that kind of use of a green building would also be part of the innovative thinking, even though it's not like a physical intervention in terms of like a mechanical system or something, but it's facilitating the space. So to illustrate a little bit more, I mentioned yesterday that there could be a pop-up of, let's say, African heritage houses over there. So we could invite them to have some kind, participate in this for a semester, where they have like, different kind of displays and other things. But those could be focused on not just culture, because we don't want to replicate what they do over there, over here, but they could focus on what we can learn about indigenous knowledge and sustainability and resilience. So this could, stays as an interpretive center on sustainability and resilience, but welcomes different groups of people and different kinds of knowledge to be shared in this space. So just as we are kind of, those of you who will be involved in fleshing out this document, this is some more pointers for that. The question I have, and this is following up on Kevin's one, and so what's the thought in the room about, RFP release? Then how long do you anticipate that RFP response period to be? And then how much time do you anticipate giving the firm to come up with a concept design? I think that having an initial, at least, idea over there would be helpful. And I'm going to delete the Clark thing over there. Yeah. So what are the general thoughts about like RFP received, and then how long is that RFP going to be?
Probably
around?
have a minimum.
Alas, that's totally in control of facilities is our problem.
Yeah, but
90
estimate.
minimum.
I think having an estimate 2 months.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's that sounds right. Again,
3 months maybe.
Okay.
it's
So
it's
we-
not happening in a vacuum. I
Yeah.
mean, so what we're doing is helping build awareness, et cetera, but there's, yes.
So if this is March 1st, then can we say June 1st?
No. I think Chris is saying that's too short of a time.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that, boy, it'd be nice if we could have hired a design firm by June 1st. I think that would be amazing.
July 1st, August 1st.
And put it on there, but
I
I think that, these dates get massaged once I can get with Joe and the team to kind of work
There
through.
certainly is something to be said towards trying to get something done in 2025, because this
Right.
is the anniversary.
Yeah.
So having
Yeah.
some major
So
done.
going by
You know.
fiscal year, like let's
Mhm.
can we say July 1st is an aspirational deadline to have the RFP, the farm selected?
Well, that means obviously getting an RFP out.
Right.
in
Yeah.
there, right?
RFP released March,
Right.
so by July, you have the farm
Sure.
working.
Mhm.
And then
Sounds
how
good.
long from the experts, how long do you think a concept design will take? Like once the farm is hired, is it a 1-year process or?
Well, just to make sure that we're on the same page, when I was talking about all of this analysis work, I'm assuming that they're gonna be hired to come in and do thermal comfort analysis and
yes.
acoustical analysis,
That's my understanding.
right?
as well,
All
right?
of that. So the,
Well,
in
they've
other
got to
words,
hire their subs.
Yeah,
yeah,
they're-
research.
But they're overseeing all of that, is right, Lindsay, that's what you're
Right.
thinking.
So
They're
I
like,
mean,
we hire
I'm-
them to oversee that stuff.
That feels like schematic design to me. I mean,
Interesting,
that the
yeah.
first round, and that's what I was asking Mark about yesterday, of just so what might you do in a shorter time frame? They have to do the fractal of a lot of that. They can touch on every one of those disciplines or issues in a concept phase and use their best sense of what needs to happen. But
Yeah.
I don't know that they're going to do all the deep.
At the end of the
Analysis.
day, I think they need to put dollars on things,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and again, like you say, at a concept level, and there'll be some, frame, but at least our understanding is that a $2 million project or a $20 million project or a 200, because really, even $20 million, I see capital projects around this campus, $20 million is not
This day and
not a
age,
shocker.
Absolutely.
Not a lot,
This day and age, yeah, if you're talking glazing and
Yeah.
the whole.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I think we should flesh out what the scope of this RFP is a little bit, because I hear Lindsay saying these different pieces of analysis, and we ask firms to put together a team to do this analysis. Analysis for what? One way to look at it is to say all of this analysis then leads to a scope of work, a design, the definition of a design problem. And it may have some preliminary costing associated with it or something. But that scope is then what leads to the concept design. I don't think we're ready to, I don't think there's any firm out there that can give you a fee proposal to do a concept design on something that we don't even know what it is yet. I think we have to get to the what it is yet. And I think that could be pretty quick. I don't think that takes.
That initial analysis, you're
Yeah,
saying.
the analysis that Lindsay's begun to outline that will lead to a scope of work.
I think that's a good question. I think actually part of it is, it's a question for you all about how much you want this to be pedagogical and involve students.
Right.
So like, you know, something like an acoustics analysis of the classrooms could probably be like a day or two, maybe. Maybe you would do some sort of instrumentation that you'd leave behind for a couple of weeks while classes were in session, but like probably not. Thermal comfort, same thing. You could do a couple of days, like the thermal comfort analyses that have taken place in existing buildings that I'm aware of, maximum a week. But if you wanted it to be pedagogical, then yeah, you're gonna sort of want to get I don't know how long ahead of time you have to essentially say, we're going to have a class in the spring, and it's going to be where all of these people are going to come in and do their analysis and talk to the students about how the analysis works. Like that's, so I think you have some choices to make there. But if you wanted to preference faster, then you could do that. It just wouldn't be as educational.
I feel like a critical point here is to understand that we need a cost estimate that goes to the Board of Trustees so that they can approve us doing more stuff. And I feel like we should work as quickly as possible to get to that point, because I think talking about engaging lots of students in classes, that's just frustrating if there's no guarantee that this is moving forward. That's going nowhere.
Well, how
You
did
know?
it work 25 years ago?
Well, it was a different, you made the point, and I agreed with you, Lindsay. It was different last time. And I think the last time, David spent, 6 years or something, or 5 years building the momentum. That's not where we are now. We've got a building. We're talking about renovating a building at the end of the day, is what we're talking about. So you don't need to like convince people that there needs to be a building here. The building's here. And I think we need as short a time span as possible to getting something before the trustees that they can like say, yeah, we're good on this, and then get us to the point where we can fundraise for it.
So John,
I think John's right, and I think the initial authorization here was for a $2 million building. And the final as-built was what, 7.3 or some numbers. Then we added this, and the PB raised another roughly 2 million. But it expands, and John's right, get the additional approval, which is basically a useful fix. Let it grow without seeing it happen. And that's where outside pressure comes in really valuable. Get people outside, one up in the New York Times would move half the board.
So do we even need the analysis to be done for the initial thing? Like to
That's why I
kind
just
of.
keep thinking that
That's
it's the fractal, it's analysis, it's a degree of analysis and a
degree.
design
It's like a little
synthesis.
bit, yeah.
To just say, to help flesh out the scope of these issues and give some visualization that is compelling about how it might be addressed. That's how I see it.
I think there's
I
a
agree with Kevin.
fundamental distinction. If we're saying the goal is to take this icon of the green building movement and make it the best building it could be in the 2.0, without regard to cost effectiveness and so forth, that's one thing. If either the school requires or our feeling of its relevance to the industry requires that we say, we chose to do the glass because by spending $1 million on glass, we could save X, Y, and Z, or more specifically, changing out the PVs, which is going to be a controversial thing. We're going to have to really talk that through. If we want to have that level of proof to justify what we did, either to the board, to the rest of the industry, that's a serious bit of analysis to be able to figure out. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's legitimate to say this was the greenest building we could do in the year 2000. What's the greenest building we can do in 2025, regardless of what it costs? And because we want to be a model, we want to show what's possible. And then people can pick and choose what they do in their own renovation based on our experiences. I think that's a different kind of thing. And I don't know which direction we're going in. Let's make it as green as possible. We could write the RFP for that today. I mean, that's not that hard. If it's you have to prove the legitimacy of these decisions, that takes longer.
Russ, good point. I think the board, the less detail you get anchored on, it's in concrete, the better. So you're asking, what's the board's tolerance for a vision? What you're really selling to the board is this building, unlike any other building on campus, has elevated the reputation and visibility of Oberlin College. That's a big deal. And in doing that, you raised a lot of money. I think if I put a pencil to a hard analysis of the money that came in because of this building, we go up into 70, 80, $90 million. The hotel, it's a $34 million project. That would not have happened if this wasn't period. Neither would the addition to the theater. That wouldn't have happened either. Neither would the East College Street project. That was a couple of kids who were influenced by this building, and they started a big development company. Now they're partnering with the college on another arts and so forth project on the synagogue in the east side of Cleveland. So what else can happen? And a lot of things have happened here. We could document that. And that's an important part of this RFP. This is a big deal. So you're selling, I think, to the board the idea of leadership. We've got the details. We've already shown leadership. And whether you're swapping out the glazing, which I hope we do, but that's a detail. And everything that they'll decide this for a board member is what this does for Oberlin College and how that translates into money. And I think it's if you get a little expansive, this building probably generated maybe upwards of $100 or more million. Downtown redevelopment was about 110 or so, just alone, including the hotel. So there's a financial reason for this. Leads me to a point. John and I met with Michael Grisiak, the development, what do you call it, advancement now, or
Advancement.
what do they call it?
Advancement.
They need to be brought along, and they're the hardest people in the world to bring along because they have this very restricted view of what fundraising is. And they always have to sell loyalty. So they're selling it to mostly alums and then a few foundations on the side. What we're selling here is excitement and leadership. And that's just a whole different category. And that's where the outside, an outside advisory board or some outside people who can publicize this would be really important. A couple of celebrities would really, and they're not hard to come by. I mean, we know people. And so anyway, long story, I think we don't sell details. I mean, that's a game. You don't want to get involved in, oh, gee, this is 8% of that. Oh my God, you can't do that. That's 42 points. You don't win those battles.
So the question I have then is, what are we expecting against this RFP? Like, what is this? What will be the outcome of the work? What level of details will be included? Are we expecting in this concept design? So if maybe John, if you could.
I think it's rough numbers. I think we have a vision right now and a story to tell that's general. I think, no, you can't raise any money until you got some numbers on it. And I think David's probably, well, David knows his shit. When he says, like, you start with a set of numbers and those numbers are probably an underestimate, but it doesn't matter. They just need to be numbers that get you through the process of approval. And then the vision gets larger, but it doesn't cost the institution anymore because the vision gets larger, you get more donors who want to contribute to it. So it's not like you're doing something underhanded here. It's just the vision grows, along the way. But we want the simplest possible thing we can get before the board. And I think that simplest possible thing certainly needs a level of detail that doesn't exist now. And I think all of the conversations we've had in this discussion are helping us to flesh out, what needs to be fixed in this building to make it work better, and what are the innovations that we could do that would make it, part of a new story, an innovative story.
And how much it will cost.
But I think what I'm getting out of this bit of discussion is the numbers on what it needs to cost and the detail on that probably do not want to be so great as what David's saying, and I think he's probably right on that. They want to be vague enough so that you don't get some trustee saying, I don't like this detail, and getting like obsessed with the detail, you know?
I think if that's true, you don't really want to do this analysis yet. I think you want to pay somebody a smaller amount of money from the budget that you have to give you a ballpark number and maybe to help with a couple of visuals that you can put in the pitch that you make to the Board of Trustees. And maybe you hire somebody to help you with the pitch to the Board of Trustees to kind of really, shine it up and do some things like saying, how do we compare to other campuses around? How is there any project, is there any single group of people that's had a bigger impact on Overland as a town and as a college than this particular group? You make sure that they're just like super on board on all of that stuff. But like, you don't need an acoustical analysis to do any of that. So I wouldn't call that your critical path. Because if you do, then first of all, you're missing out on the pedagogical opportunities of all of this stuff that can happen later. But also, it muddles the story of like, you're providing way too much detail to a Board of Trustees. And if that's really your gate, then that's what you spend the money on right now. And once you get through that gate, then you actually figure out what the building's gonna be. But
Yeah, I think LA is burning and it's gonna have to be rebuilt. Will be rebuilt in some sort of fashion. I wonder if you can partner with some design school or redesign effort in the LA area. Partner not do the work with, but we partner with them even at the level, conceptual level. Right? So that this then becomes a catalyst for a deeper conversation about probably the most important rebuilding project America has ever been undertaken.
I think there are probably also ways to do that, even without a specific design school. I think some of the stories that we can tell about this project help to put form to the way that we will rebuild.
And fireproofing LA, fireproofing the planet. Related thing.
I'll leave it to you to come up with the
Probably
pitch lines.
with fires that are in our under the hoods of our car and in our furnaces. We got a lot of fire.
I'm in.
Well, if you look at the very few houses that survived. They're passive house design specifically done in a fashion that is intentional and resulted in that. There's more elements to the story than just let's rebuild this. There is, I mean, it's horrible to think about, and I don't want to trade on other people's misery, but there are success stories to be part of it as well.
But so going back to I think the timeline, having an understanding is important. And what I'm getting is that a better sense of what the expectations are. That we're not expecting a complete analysis of all of this. We want a general, take on what are the things that's going to happen and how much it may cost, so that we can move forward. The goal is to get the administration on board and get the fundraising machine going, right?
So does that meet the expectation of like what an RFP would be in your world though, Chris, in terms of
I
like
think
the
that
scope of work?
they were expecting an A&E, architectural engineering assessment of the thing, so we understand how are the systems performing. Where Joe's going, he said, so some stuff it just needs to be upgraded, it doesn't need to be replaced. Let's identify what those are so we can deal with them. And it helps to kind of straighten out then what is the big visionary new stuff? We can articulate that, and then we can build those in. But that's what he was expecting. But I think what we're talking about, very high level, keep it very high level, because you've only got a little bit of time with these folks to sell and it's the sizzle, it's not the bacon. That really, just so that we can take some of these next steps. We're gonna have to have some of these analysis done. But I think that we need the pedagogical component. We need to open this up so our students, we can really have that involvement. We can go fast, but I think we want to go far. I understand there's a tension there.
Yeah, there's definitely a tension.
I think there's a go fast with first step and then a go far with second step. The question is, what's the minimal thing we can do to move quickly.
Yeah.
Now, keep momentum.
Minimum
And
viable.
what I heard from Joe is kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. Like, I feel like we want to include all the ideas in this. We don't need an analysis that gives us details on all the ideas, but we need an analysis that addresses all the ideas, you know? But then I think probably on the mechanicals, we do need details because I think that's what Joe's looking for on the mechanical. So I think it's a slightly mixed,
Right.
you know, you know
Or
what I'm
like,
saying? Do
or
you
like
think
the
I'm right?
lab, for example, the annex may not be in this scope at all for this RFP, because all you're trying to do is get to the next, you're trying to get permission from the Board of Trustees to go on the project. So you don't need the people to analyze the existing annex or anything like that. The scope can be smaller, because all you're trying to do is get a green light on the project, and then you add stuff afterwards that you want to, but because I'm just looking at this list, and even then, like, yeah, some of this you may not want to, I don't know that you want to do a daylighting or lighting analysis. Like, a lot of stuff is not just standard practice analysis to get an to get a price on a renovation.
I think what I heard from John was that, that these ideas should be there,
Right.
but we don't need to have the analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this list, if you're on the receiving end of that RFP as an AE and landscape little consortium, this list tells you the scope of ambition of the college, and what you really, honestly, I think from a building and keeping momentum standpoint, the critical thing is RFP out, design team selected. You really want that to be, these are the people you're going to ride with for the next whatever set of, you know, so that decision is so critical because they need to be savvy enough to do the just right level of analysis synthesis to create, to substantiate and confirm the storytelling.
Yeah.
Confirm the vision.
Right.
And they may be who you bring in the room on a couple of these
And they may
jobs
have
to go
some more
raise the
ideas
money.
on vision, as you
Right.
said
You know,
earlier.
That's why they would be
They're a
qualified.
critical
Yeah.
partner
Right.
of, you two are a very compelling team. And if you had the designers who are helping you towards this future vision, like, and we have some thoughts about how this works, that's how you might go and make some substantive pitches to some people, you know?
Kevin, how compelling is fairly compelling?
This one is fairly compelling. Pretty good.
You know, the initial concept paper is a hell of a good start.
That's right.
It is.
And I think this could be tweaked a little bit and sent to the board and say, you know, you want to put some of this up there, these are things, but it's what the building does. You know, on completion, what's AJLC 2.0 do in the world? And what does that do for overall?
Yeah, and I think
That's
that the short order of tying back to why what was done 25 years ago is important is that that vision statement, again, the shorter version of
Right.
even that, the 10-point, 8-point,
It's actually in there.
it is in there,
Yeah.
but I pull it to the front
Yeah.
because there's that.
Right.
And the beauty of that is that it still stands 25 years
It
later. The
does.
ask is still the same. That is compelling. And that's also the ask for what goes forward. When you could hope that in 2050, they revisited that and it still made sense. Wow. They didn't know exactly how to do it in 2020. They tried. 2025, they refreshed it. And now here we are. But we're still trying to not cause ugliness, and we're still trying to power our, you know, and be local and be native and be.
I feel like we're getting there. I feel like what's gonna happen likely next, because that's what I think we want to talk about in our last half an hour here is, you know, and I want to be sensitive to where Chris is, because he's still new, it's still a year. B, he's got a lot of other stuff on his plate right now that I'm sensitive to. But there is this opening, which Chris doesn't want me to say too much about, but there's an opening in terms of, I think Joe saying, well, are you going to be our rep on this? Well, we do know, regardless of whether that's the thing, we do know that Chris is going to be a key player here.
Well, yeah,
So I think
that's
at some level, I think it's David and Chris and I, you know, obviously keep students engaged, keeping, Rumi and Ben and the rest of the team engaged. But I think we need to work together on this, at least the beginning of the RFP, based on this discussion. You know, we need to, the three of us need to flesh out what that thing is and then get feedback from everyone on that. And that's like our next step. And I feel like this is really helpful and we're getting a lot of clarity here.
Yep.
In yesterday's discussion on what it is and in today's discussion on what is scope. Because that's really what I feel like we've been struggling with all morning is
Right.
scope issues. And I feel like we're settling on the scope is we want a firm that can talk about all these things, give some sort of ballpark figures, because all we're trying to do is get to the board and figure out, is this some level of go?
So Russ,
Let me put on my A&E firm managing partner hat for a minute. I think what we're looking for is an RFQ, a request for qualifications, not an RFP. I
Right.
don't think we have a scope that anybody can price.
right, right.
So that we select on the basis of qualifications, we get the best people in the room. And then we work through
Yeah.
what they're gonna do and how much it's gonna cost.
point.
And
Does
we
this,
don't-
is this fit with,
Oh, I was gonna say, because again, my reference point is my work at the zoo, and when we were talking about drawing in national zoological exhibit firms, we brought them in to do the concept design because they were nationally known and they knew this stuff. They weren't hired to build the thing and see it all through. We would get to the concept. We had that, when we had that and we had a budget we could work with.
they would put a
Then we-
price tag as part of
then-
their work?
Yes, through concept.
Right.
Then we went out and we looked for teams that
Right.
had qualifications and it typically was a national firm with a local firm. And then that was our design firm. They would go all the way through and they would consult then on hiring the construction manager, et cetera. But we also had an owner's rep. We hired the owner's
Yeah.
rep to oversee the whole thing.
Yeah.
To really help us work it
Right.
through. But I just think that RFP, and we combined RFP, RFQ, so we weren't selecting on lowest price. Because we also were a private institution, we were stuck with that. But I agree with you, it's like you want to have the highest, the best qualified firms that
Right.
we're dealing with. But it just helps to give it some shape.
You don't want somebody who gets an RFP and looks at it and understands that they're being competitive and they decide not to bring Bill Browning in because
Right.
nobody else is gonna bring him in and their price is gonna be too
Right.
high. You want them to be able to have the freedom to say, if it's gonna work out,
Right.
Bill Browning is the right guy to do this, and then we have a conversation,
Right.
decide what he's gonna do.
And
Was the
Clark,
RFQ something where because we need them to put a price tag on things, obviously. How does that, what's the trajectory there?
Well, you
Well, what-
combine them.
They'll do that. Like,
Not
you
at the
mean,
not at
is
the
there a
queue,
concern that, yeah, you just say that
Yeah.
that's a deliverable.
right,
As part of their qualifications, they're putting, some
Right.
sort of, this is what it's gonna cost us to figure this
No,
out.
that's what I'm saying, don't do that.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
You want them at the table, Russ, they're selected. You have the session, they get a better sense of what this is all about, and you collectively define what concept design scope is.
Yes.
They're part of that discussion. They
And
are
then-
qualified to be part of that.
And then
discussion.
ideally, everybody is so thrilled working with each other that you simply negotiate the price at that point. Instead of saying, okay, so put together a piece of paper, now we're gonna put it out for competitive bids. I think the competitive bid process in something as adventurous as this is going to stifle creativity.
So they're part of knowing that your pile of stones that you're gonna spin for this phase, they're part of, well, so then that will help define how long it is, how deep you go, what the final deliverable is, how much resources are available to do the scope.
And going with an RFQ versus an RFP, and I'm not gonna dwell on this a whole lot. Going with an RFQ instead of an RFP signals a certain confidence of the institution. That we're not afraid of you. We're not afraid you're gonna take advantage of us. We wanna find a team member who's gonna work with us and get this right.
Yeah. That's a good point.
End of speech.
Does that fit with what you think Joe Komar is gonna find acceptable, I guess is the question mark.
It's hard for me to say.
Sure, why not?
I don't know. Yeah,
Pitch it, see what happens.
yeah.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, like Joe said, he needs somebody to tell him to do it. You know what I mean? It's like ultimately, but
But-
I like the process we're talking about, and
Yeah.
I think that I think it makes sense. I think it addresses where we are. It also addresses what we're attempting to, the vision, the scale, and that ultimately, back to David's point, that's where we need to be, because it's going to have to be such a bright thing that it's going to have to eclipse some of the other urgent needs. But we're going to want to work with the best, I think, to be in alignment with that.
When we had lunch and were outlining this yesterday, I had a good sense that that experience at the zoo and that kind of going out and the processing of it felt right to me. You know, like, that seems reasonable for the level of ambition.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the need to be sort of nationally cast.
Need for ambition.
yeah. But my sense is too, like, we also, just because of where this has shown up, you know, we started this a year ago, and they were like, AJLC, what's wrong with the
There's nothing
AJLC?
wrong with it.
Yeah, sure, there's a bunch of stuff wrong with it, like everything else around here. Get in line, you know? That we just have to have it incremental enough to allow them to kind of catch up. And, you know, and as we've just described, we're not gonna get a whole lot of mind share, so it's gonna be pretty high up.
Well, I just feel like this issue of, and I know I sound like a one note instrument here, but the alignment of this with SIP and telling the SIP story. There's a
yes.
lot of, at the colleges now, scrambling to try to figure out, how do we tell the SIP story? And I think right now they're very much focused on, how do we tell the SIP story over the next couple months? That's kind of the wrong question. I mean, it's a good question, but the real question is, how do we tell the SIP story over the next 20 years? You know, so that we continue this, and this is the answer to that question. So I think we need to keep that in the whole thing, so that because I think that's what's going to sell us at some level, at least some piece of this.
Well, and it's
You
not
could
just,
ask Gibson's to fund the whole thing.
yeah,
There you go.
it's not just telling the SIP story like we've got a shiny new building and we're not gonna talk about
Right.
anything else.
Right.
It's the whole
It's
story.
the
So
whole kit and caboodle.
Russ, I think you're set, right? Lindsay, do you still,
Yeah, I was just gonna volunteer to
Clark?
take up a piece of this.
Let's get them on the line.
That like, I guess I'll just make an offer that I think that our movement, it is sort of high time for us to convene. Everything that's happened with the administration, even just in the past 2 weeks, we're all feeling it. It is impossible for us all to get into one room together on particularly short notice. I think it's probably something like September, first weeks of September. But then I was thinking about that and I was like, well, actually there's kind of beautiful thing about that, because in September, it will be 25 years since that moment happened when this building opened. That will,
It was January.
was it? The event that happened with
Oh, the
McDonough and all of
event,
that?
But the move-in was.
Not the
January.
move-in, the event where McDonough spoke and you guys
Oh,
all
and
came out.
the track team streaked across the
That was the
area naked. It was
That was
a
groundbreaking.
That would have been groundbreaking, it would have been.
That was probably not
That was
January.
Or no, not groundbreaking. Like,
No, it's so overly.
it was, I was here, it was definitely in my first weeks at
The
Oberlin, so it
TV
was
cameras
in
went like
September.
this to cover the street. It was hilarious.
So if you all would like to be a venue for that and work with me on what would be to sort of spin it into some national conversation, or think about how that could then be used to leverage press coverage.
Time-wise for us, it's like,
Push it back, it's, I mean,
It could
second or third
maybe
week of September.
be, no, it can't be that because it's climate week. It's our national.
I think
it's our-
ideally we should do
in
something
the
like this over
fall.
a summer.
August, but then
because,
you wouldn't
yeah,
get students.
Yeah, anything, I mean, because then
So,
of course we're
yeah.
taking advantage of the campus, it's not
Yeah.
occupied.
There's a thing, but anyway, like,
Yeah.
so we need to convene somewhere. We could have it be here,
Mm.
and I can, and I could take on coordinating with you all to see if it would work to have it here.
It'd be great.
But so like, so I'll just say that I could do that. We may end up convening with or without you, but if we could figure out a way to get it to happen here, that would be great. I think the challenge for us is money. People generally say they can't, they need to be able to have. The reason we've never done it before is because no one's ever gone out to, well, it's been a long time. It's been 20 years since anyone pitched to do a convening and got money from philanthropy to do that.
Greenville does not serve that purpose.
The conference?
The
No.
idea of convening of that.
No, I mean, I actually had suggested to the folks who run Greenville this year, this upcoming year, that we do like a little closed door strategy session during it. But, I mean, that's not quite the same thing that you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, there's lots of other ways we could do it. And I mean, it's easier for us to do it in a lot of places than it would be to do it here. But if you think that there's a value to it, then we could talk about that. And I think the earliest it could happen is probably July. But you know, let's just throw that out.
And just-
So, yeah, I'm just gonna say, you know, it's now time, I still want us to walk out of here with who's gonna do what when. Maybe that's what you're gonna talk about, I don't know.
That's not what I was going to talk about. But I want to add on to something, you know, I don't know how it fits into the timeline of this, but, you know, David, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but the next meeting of US Society for Ecological Economics will happen in Oberlin next year in summer. So, and I'm trying to bring in Costanza and others, all of those people to Oberlin. It could be another platform to just, you know, nationalize
That'd be great.
the
What, the next is 2026?
2026, yes.
Okay.
So the venue has been already set, that is gonna happen in June of 2026.
That would be a great venue for an article on full cost pricing in architecture, talking about. this.
Absolutely. I was going to talk to you more about it, but it's going to happen here and I'm coordinating
That'd be
that.
great. That'd be great. I got one to do. You three students, we need an article in the paper or a series of articles. Announce the project to your peers and start to build a student constituency behind 2.0. So, John will sign your grade.
But I mean, it's an interesting point that there may be some very straightforward student projects in this that help you to sell this differentiation story that I think is really necessary, the sort of why Oberlin and how unique is it. I think it would be very cool to work with Chris's team, et cetera, to figure out just how far ahead are we? I mean, like you were saying about, was it second nature?
Second nature, yeah.
Like trying to sort of ask that question of like, how well is Oberlin doing in comparison to its peers, and like by what measures, what do we know about that? I think that would be a good, there's some student work that could come out of that.
I recognize that we have a good chunk of money already, but in terms of constituency building and student engagement, et cetera, it might not be a bad idea to get the Green Edge Fund to throw some money at it as well. And as just another campus-based organization, student-run, student-funded, to assist in that process. Even if it's just token.
Are you still the advisor of that? Okay.
And I am teaching at Aging Society this semester, and students in that class do individual mini projects and also group projects. So I could, as it matches with my syllabus, assign some more preliminary work on some of these things in that class for students to do.
So if one of the first steps is to write an RFQ, do you need permission from somebody to do that? I mean,
To write it? Or?
I mean, to put it out on the street?
Yeah.
Probably yes.
Yeah.
And so
Well, I mean,
They're getting a lot of
no,
trouble.
and again, well, I mean,
Not
again,
to write it.
I'm
You can say
I'm
it's
energy
wrong.
sustainability,
Yeah.
you know, I gotta know my lane, and again, and the purpose here really is to bring along the rest of facilities, so, but it would be a Joe's team, and he said to us, you know, we could get together and we would work on it.
So the question is,
who has to give permission and what do we have to do to get that permission?
How many different gates do we have to get?
I think we have, and I think that
Yeah.
we've got it with Komar, and he would work with us. I mean, it's gonna be, the content's gonna come from us, and he's got a format, you know, that we'll follow or whatever. It's then
So you have,
putting
you
it,
have the
releasing
money.
it, you know, and I think that it's an invitation. And so it would be firms that I would think would start in this room, you know, who would you suggest?
Right,
right.
Who reach out to?
Yeah.
So it's not just publishing the plain deal.
Yeah.
But to me, and again, you understand your role vastly better than I do, Chris. And if it's an RFQ, it seems like even a little bit less of a commitment on the part of the institution, because an RFQ isn't a commitment to do anything.
I mean, we are, it's a little, talk about that, Russ, because I think that you're under contract, we're gonna pay you, but we're just saying the cost isn't the first part of the discussion here. It's really your
Cost is not
qualifications.
part of the selection process.
Right.
Because we can't define the scope well enough for people to be able to do that in a way that's advantageous to you.
So literally, there's no contractual payment implied. with the
Sure, there would
RFQ.
be, yeah.
I mean, and part of the qualifications may be a schedule of rates and, you know, other things so that you can compare apples to apples. You select somebody and then you, on that basis, you negotiate the scope and you negotiate the fee, as opposed to having the fee being part of the selection process.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. because-
And you characterize the entire, the ambition of the project long-term and that there will be an initial phase.
Yeah.
And you lay that out as, you know, and that we will be scoping that initial phase, as we engage or make our selection.
I think you're gonna get your best advice from people under that scenario. Is my sense.
Right.
And we are talking about that initial phase, really.
Right.
It's bringing them on to help us scope out that initial
Yeah.
phase and hire the firms to
Conceptual
do it.
cost
It's
estimate.
the best, get them in the room.
Yeah.
And
And the outcome of that ultimately would be the concept
Yeah,
design and budget we've been talking
that's
about.
right.
Okay.
So very literally, the next step is for you guys to pitch Joe
Right.
Komar to say, can we do it as an RFQ? Because the folks in the room who know how this might play out suggest starting that way, and here's what we would do next,
Yeah.
and can we do it that way instead of an RFP?
Yeah.
And get
It
his
makes a lot of
green light.
sense too, in sequencing
Right.
his confidence in the project. You're not asking him to buy into the whole thing.
Right.
Series of steps. That's-
Who's gonna write it and who's gonna
Well,
talk?
so
to
that's
Joe?
not a writing thing, that's a conversation.
Well, that's a
Chris.
conversation,
Well, once he
but
says
shouldn't you
yes.
have something
Well, I think
in your
then.
hand? I mean, I agree,
I
I
think
agree
it's the
with
three of
David.
us.
It's pretty much there. You know,
Yeah,
the document that you wrote, and you might wanna move a few things around, but
well, I think it has like.
It
these
has
in
all
this-
this
it has
stuff in
this,
it.
and so it's
Right.
more than that, but it's not that much more than that.
no,
But
but
It's got
it's
a couple
enough.
more pages.
I think you all want to be the offer.
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right,
You don't want to say that to Joe, based on what
Oh,
you
No,
know.
no,
no,
right
and
now.
he doesn't want that either.
Yeah.
right.
No, you say to Joe, hey, listen, it sounds like we've got internal people who are up for putting it together, and we're gonna circulate it by this larger group, which you have met with and have some confidence in now. And then is it cool for us to do that? I guess is what you're asking him. Does that seem like a process we can do, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
You all have no doubt done this before, and there are some examples out there of RFQs that could be
Yeah,
used.
I'm forgetting what we had for, I think it was an RFQ for Evergreen. And the series, I mean, it's before your time, but I was on the committee that hired Evergreen, and I'm trying to remember if there was a budget or if it was just, we're looking for a design firm to work with us on this.
So
Maybe
that-
there
that's
was
a-
a budget.
That's another way to do it, is to say, we want to see your qualifications. We're gonna do a $200,000 study, and you tell them, and.
Yeah,
so-
here's the limitations. I'm,
Right.
I'm hoping that this is the chance to engage, and like we've heard from others we've talked to. They're willing to do, they know this is gonna be kind of a loss leader, but it's
Right.
the opportunity to be part of
Right.
this now, what it is, what it
Right.
means to the
Sign it
industry,
Right.
to save Ohio.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think
Good.
we have
I
some
guess we're
idea
done.
what we might be doing here, and we are
only quarter hour.
rolling down to the end, and maybe it's early for me to say this, but I am, I'm so grateful and humbled by, you know, the contributions you guys have made. I can't thank you guys enough for taking time and doing this with us. It's really, I think, I personally feel like, you know, we've gotten probably where we needed to go and probably about as far as we could have gotten under the circumstances, you know, so I have zero disappointment in terms of where we are, where we've landed right now. I don't, you know, I mean, I think we all came into this with a little bit of fear, maybe Russ, about like, how the heck is this thing gonna work and where are we going? I felt that from you anyways in our conversations. You know, this is different. Where are we going? And I personally, I mean, I'm interested what you guys hear, but I feel like we probably got where we needed to go with this.
Yeah.
I could a round of applause here for John and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've tried, but he's like, so, and I just, partly for me, this comes from John, I don't remember if it was an email or a phone call, but first putting this idea out there, and it was kind of like, oh, the building's 25 years old. That was my first response. And then, but we've got this much bigger idea and how to frame that and how to move forward with it. And, but then pulling to, I mean, the winter term thing was really a great thing to have. And you know, I'm gonna get students, you get these students, pull this whole thing together. I mean, I think the timing and the management of it, to go back to something that David said a while ago, has really been remarkable. I've been through a lot of shit like this over the years. And the fact, number one, how many times have those of you been in these kinds of things been on time almost the entire time? I mean, that never happens, right? So I don't know how we all managed to do that, but you three and John really did bring something together here that really worked, and you really ought to take that in. It's a great experience for the three of you, and you had John there kind of pulling weight, and you know, we had, of course, at the beginning, early on, some of the discussions with David and everything, and David's a key piece of this, obviously, so.
Yeah, well, there's no go without David,
Thanks.
but you know, to those of you who came in, you know, you guys are so critical to this, and you know, I mean, you know, remember a conversation Lindsay and I were having about like, damn, I do not want to be the leader on this project. I have zero interest in this. I've got too much on my plate, and Lindsay said, yeah, it's kind of on you.
Yeah.
I did say that. I did say that.
You send an email, just that.
Hey, Russ and Kevin, you guys have brought back so many memories of what you guys did, you know, way back when. And incredible. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here.
What you did was amazing. That's the thing. It's like you were, of course, you were gathered about like what are all the warts and like, you know, problems with it. But man, what you guys built, you know, and I had zero.
What they put up with, because we were not a good client. The project hung by a very slender thread, and the phone call, I forgot the year now, but the phone call probably 1998 or thereabouts, which McDonough and Partners, you guys principally decided on the phone call, the whole team is ready to quit. And everyone, engineers, everyone's ready to walk away. And you guys hung in there with it. So we wouldn't be here without that vote of confidence and some courage on your part. But then you made so much money on this project.
Still get royalties on it, right? Every time we talk about the AJLC, you get a couple pennies.
That's right. Plus the state charge for several city blocks.
And we got sunny weather just to disprove.
Yeah.
It does exist.
Well, I do think we should take a picture in front of the building before we all.
Yeah, we totally.
That's a great idea.
I don't know how much.
Really good point, yeah. Yeah,
Maybe some
yeah,
random
let's-
person walking by will take it or something.
Yeah.
I think we should do that.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, of course.
I'd just like to thank everybody for being here, participating, but also for letting my firstborn join.
Yeah.
for-
Yeah.